Chapter 676. Looking at the brown-haired, middle-aged man, Gray walked down from the battleground. His opponent's murderous vibe did not affect him. He had killed an annihilation class before, so he would not be intimidated by the murderous vibe of a magic light class. With what had happened before and what had happened today, he and the Wagia family had become enemies. There would be a lot of trouble in the future, but he was not afraid. The Wagia family did not have what it took to scare him. He did not want to cause trouble, but he was not afraid. Moreover, if he could increase his cultivation level in the trial tower and reach the requirement to consume Blood Fiend's blood twice in a row, he would immediately obtain a second ability at the level of a rule. At that time, he would be even more fearless. A scream came from Miguel Wagia, who had been placed on a stretcher. He was severely injured and had just taken a high-class recovery medicine. He slowly woke up. He struggled to sit up, but his injuries were aggravated. He was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat. Do not move. You are severely injured. Even if you have taken a high-class recovery medicine, you will need to rest for at least half a month. The brown-haired, middle-aged man quickly went to hold him. I'm sorry, second uncle. I have disappointed you. Miguel Wagia's voice was filled with unwillingness and disappointment. He thought he had leveled up to the 4th tier of King class and had the power to fight his opponent. He did not expect to be defeated in one hit. This loss was worse than the last. Last time, he had not fainted, but this time he had fainted. No, you didn't disappoint me. Among the younger generation of the top clans, your realm is only below Blanca and Mandy. This already proves your talent. The reason you lost to the child of the Leopold family was not because your talent was not as good as his. It was because the child of the Leopold family had mixed 3 elements. The brown-haired, middle-aged man shook his head and comforted him. Fod, your child of the Leopold family was too cruel. The tall, skinny old man walked forward. He checked on Miguel Wagia's injuries. His face looked gloomy as he looked at Fod. His voice was unfriendly. Too cruel? Felipe, you are so old. I did not expect you to say something like that. Fod had a mocking expression on his face. The rules of the Trial Tower's qualification competition state that once you step onto the stage, there is no need to hold back. If there is a death or a cripple, the referee will step in to stop it. Have you forgotten this rule? Are you getting muddle-headed with age? Fod, watch your tone. In front of Lord Felipe, you are just a junior. Seeing Fod mocking and ridiculing Felipe, the people from the Wagia family who had come with them were instantly enraged. The brown-haired, middle-aged man even reprimanded him angrily. His son, Miguel, had been severely injured by a member of the Leopold family. Now, his own patriarch was being ridiculed by a member of the Leopold family. The one who should pay attention to is you. What qualifications does a magic light have to shout at me? Is this the upbringing of the Wagia family? Fod looked disdainfully at the brown-haired, middle-aged man. It is just a fake. Whether or not it can be called an annihilation class is still debatable. Why am I not qualified? The brown-haired, middle-aged man sneered sarcastically. Really? Fod's eyes were cold, and his voice was cold. If that is the case, why don't you fight me in the arena? Since you think I am a fake, then I am not bullying you. You, hearing Fod propose a duel, the brown-haired, middle-aged man's face froze. Although he had always thought Fod was a fake and did not agree with his identity as an Annihilation class elite, he also knew that Fod's combat power was not much weaker than an ordinary Annihilation class elite. With his Magic Light class combat power, if he were to fight Fod in the arena, he would definitely be the one to die. Fod, don't you think it is shameful to challenge a Magic Light? If you want, I am willing to accompany you. Seeing that the brown-haired, middle-aged man was forced into a corner, Felipe was afraid that the brown-haired, middle-aged man would agree impulsively. Did you hear that? Even your patriarch thinks that I'm bullying you by challenging you. Next time, watch your seniority. Do not simply interrupt. Otherwise, you will be at a disadvantage. After lecturing the brown-haired, middle-aged man with the tone of an elder, Fod looked at Felipe and said, Felipe, if you want to fight, then I will accompany you. Well, then let's apply for a duel arena. Felipe squinted his eyes and looked at Fod. He was surprised that a fake had the guts to duel with him, but he was very confident in his own strength. He did not think that he would lose to such a fake. Humph! Suddenly, there was a cold hum. The middle-aged man who was in charge of the qualification selection looked at Felipe and Fod and spoke with a cold tone. This is the Chaos Holy Palace. It is not a place for you to settle your personal grudges. The selection of the trial tower has ended. The trial tower will open in 3 days. Leave now. Facing the middle-aged man from the Chaos Holy Palace, neither Fod nor Felipe dared to say anything. They quickly stopped their tit-for-tat and walked out of the Chaos Holy Palace. Besides them, the people from the other top families who came to watch the duel did the same. They consciously walked out of the Chaos Holy Palace. It was not that there were no people who dared to challenge the Chaos Holy Palace. The only reason they could not see them was because they had been destroyed by the Chaos Holy Palace. 3-element mixed ability. That is really shocking. It is a pity that such a disciple is not a disciple of our family. Some people from the top families looked at Gray and sighed. Obtaining the qualification to enter the trial tower might not be a good thing for the Leopold family. Some people from the top families looked at Fod and shook their heads. Although the Leopold family had obtained the qualification to enter the trial tower, they had also provoked the Wyckoff family, which was stronger than them. This might not be a good thing for the Leopold family. Walking out of the Chaos Holy Palace, Gray and the other two called for a carriage and returned to the inn. Young Master Gray, it is a little early. Why don't we walk around the city? Pulling open the curtains and looking at the shops on the street, Kinsha's eyes were filled with interest. She turned around and suggested to Gray. It is indeed a little early. Gray looked at the sun that had just risen not long ago. It was not too hot. It was indeed a little early. He nodded in agreement. After dismissing the carriage, the three walked on the streets of the city. The streets were paved with white slabs. The narrowest part was enough to allow 3 to 4 carriages to walk side by side. The ground was extremely flat and clean. There was not the slightest bit of dirt. There should be someone who cleaned every day. On both sides of the street, there was a tall tree with luxuriant foliage every 10 meters or so. It added a touch of pleasing greenery to the originally monotonous street. There was also a cool shade. The three walked at a moderate pace. When they saw a shop that interested them, they would go in and take a look. After more than an hour of strolling, Gray and Fod did not buy anything. Instead, it was Kinsha who bought a lot of things. There were beautiful jewelry, beautiful clothes, and some small ornaments placed in the room. Gray naturally would not be stingy with her. Besides, the things she bought did not cost much. With the financial support of the Leopold family, he was not short of money now. In front of them, a rather elegant 3-story shop attracted the attention of Gray and the other two. The three walked over to the entrance of the shop. The signboard at the entrance said Radiant Light Bookstore. This should be a bookstore. Come, let's go in and take a look. Gray's face was full of interest as he strode into the shop. In order to pass the time on the rune ship on this trip to Chaos City, he brought many books with him. Under normal circumstances, it would not be a problem for him to read them for a few months. However, ever since he swallowed the mist monkey's blood and obtained the supermemory ability, his reading speed had increased tremendously. He only needed to take a glance at every page, and he could remember it completely in his mind. His reading speed was as fast as scanning. Moreover, he did not just swallow the contents of the books, but could fully understand them. He felt that not only did his ability to remember the contents of the books increase, but even his ability to understand had also improved tremendously. With such a fast reading speed, he finished all the books he brought very quickly. As a result, he had no more books to read now. Now that he saw a bookstore, he could not help but be tempted to buy a batch of books to read back. After walking into the shop, Gray saw a middle-aged lady sitting behind the counter in front of the shop. The middle-aged lady was wearing an elegant long dress with light makeup on her face. She held a book in her hand and flipped through it gently. She gave off an extremely elegant feeling. Hearing the footsteps, the middle-aged lady raised her head and looked at Gray and the other two. She nodded slightly and said, "Welcome. The books in this shop are not for sale. They are only for reading. 30 magic coins per person. Not for sale, only for reading?" Gray was slightly surprised. He thought it was a bookstore at first, but now it seemed more like a library in his previous life. It only provided reading, but not for sale. After paying, Gray and the other two walked into the bookstore. They saw rows and rows of bookshelves, and there were many books on every shelf. Apart from that, there were many long tables at the side. They should be desks for reading. After rummaging through the bookshelves on the first floor, Gray, Fod, and Kesha went to the second floor. Most of the books on the first floor were about local customs and biographies. They were not the books about blood beasts that Gray needed. On the second floor, Gray easily found many books about blood beasts on a shelf. After finding dozens of books, Gray piled them up beside the desk and started reading. The sound of pages being flipped could be heard on the second floor. On the first floor, the middle-aged lady in front of the counter shifted her gaze away from the books and raised her head with a slight frown. Separated by a floor, the sound of pages being flipped was greatly reduced. Logically speaking, she should not be able to hear the sound of pages being flipped. However, she seemed to be able to hear the sound of pages being flipped extremely clearly on the second floor. Soon, she appeared on the second floor and saw Gray, who was quickly flipping through the books piled up beside him. Is he looking up information? No, that's not right. He should be memorizing the contents of the books. He has an eidetic memory, and from the speed at which he is flipping through the books, his level is not low. Chapter 677. Retentive memory, and his level is not low. The middle-aged lady was slightly surprised. She naturally knew that the ability to remember everything she saw was real. However, even those who had the ability to remember everything they saw did not have the same comprehension speed as the young man in front of her. Although it was said to have a photographic memory, in fact, most people who had this ability had a much better memory than ordinary people. However, if they wanted to completely memorize the contents of a book, they would still need to read it several times in order to do so. It was extremely rare for the young man in front of her to be able to memorize and comprehend the contents with just a glance. The middle-aged lady retracted her gaze and returned to the counter on the first floor. She went upstairs to check because she thought someone was destroying the books. Since there was no one, she naturally would not stop them. At noon, they found a restaurant near the study room for lunch. Gray and the other two only returned to the hotel in the afternoon. The collection of books in the study room was extremely rich. After a day, Gray had gained a lot. He had memorized more than 100 books that he had never read before. Not to mention the fact that it can merge with the resurrection ability and bring about new changes to the resurrection ability. Just the super memory and comprehension ability alone is worth a chance to transform. Gray could not help but smile as he thought about the day's gains. After a few days, he had a more intuitive understanding of the super memory ability. Not only could it give him super memory, but it could also give him super comprehension ability. It was definitely worth a chance to transform. Furthermore, the comprehension ability granted by super memory isn't only useful in reading books. It's also extremely helpful in comprehending blood skills. After cultivating blood skills for a few days, Gray could clearly feel that his comprehension of blood skills had improved. This was obviously given by the super comprehension ability of the super memory ability. In a luxurious residence that occupied a large area near the Chaos Sanctuary, the middle-aged lady closed the Glow Library and returned here. With her family business, she naturally did not need to run a library for a living. The reason why she ran a library was only because she was interested in it. She liked the atmosphere of reading in the library. What? You met a young man whose retentive memory is even better than mine? Are you sure? In the dining hall, the middle-aged woman was chatting with a middle-aged man and a young woman after dinner. Suddenly, the middle-aged man looked at the middle-aged woman with an excited and pleasantly surprised expression. There shouldn't be a mistake. His speed of flipping through books is very fast. His photographic memory should be better than yours. The middle-aged woman said with certainty after recalling for a while. Do you know where he lives? The middle-aged man hurriedly asked. He's just a customer of my bookstore. How would I know where he lives? The middle-aged woman rolled her eyes and looked at her husband speechlessly. She had only casually mentioned it after dinner, but she didn't expect her husband to have such a big reaction. Sigh, why didn't you send someone back to bring me a message? The middle-aged man looked regretful. How would I know that you would think so highly of him? Besides, with his talent, he should have already been taken in as a disciple by another alchemist master. The middle-aged woman felt helpless. So what if he has already been accepted as a disciple by another alchemy grandmaster? Who said that a person could not have two teachers? Besides, how can those guys compare to me? The middle-aged man's face was filled with extreme confidence. He didn't put other alchemy grandmasters in his eyes, and he indeed had the qualifications. As an alchemy grandmaster who could refine level 6 magic potions, he had already reached the peak of alchemy. There were no more than 3 people in the Chaos territory who could compare to him, and no one could surpass him. He had superb alchemy skills and an extremely high status. Even the Chaos Temple's temple master would treat him with respect. His status and wealth could be said to be unmatched. However, it wasn't that he didn't have any worries. With such superb alchemy skills, he naturally hoped that someone could pass on his skills. Unfortunately, it was too difficult to find a disciple that could satisfy him. His talent was extremely terrifying, and few people could compare to him. A disciple that could satisfy him would at least have talent comparable to him. It would be best if the disciple's talent surpassed his. He didn't expect that his wife would meet such a person. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to get the other party's contact information and didn't know where the other party lived. Father, since that person has been reading in the study room all day, it means that he found something interesting in the study room. Perhaps he will come to Mother's study room tomorrow. Seeing her father's eyes filled with regret, the young woman covered her mouth and smiled as she reminded him. She was a young woman with long black hair. Her eyes were moist, and she had long eyelashes. When she smiled, a shallow dimple would appear on the left side of her mouth. That's right, perhaps he will come again tomorrow. The middle-aged man clenched his left hand into a fist and clapped his right hand. His eyes were filled with passion. But you can't go. You have already made an appointment with the Lopez family. Tomorrow, the Lopez family will come to ask you to help refine level 5 magic potions, longevity potions. Seeing the middle-aged man's eyes burning with passion, it was obvious that he wanted to go to the study room himself. The black-haired young woman hurriedly reminded him. Decline. Get someone to send a message and tell them to meet another day. The middle-aged man decided without hesitation. That's not good, right? I'm afraid that rashly canceling will offend the Lopez family. After all, the Lopez family is one of the 3 most powerful families. They are very powerful. The black-haired young woman frowned. So what if it's the Lopez family? I even dared to stand up the elders of the Chaos Temple, let alone the Lopez family. The middle-aged man had a proud look on his face. It wasn't as if he had never stood someone up before. The last person he had stood up was an elder of the Chaos Temple. Even so, the other party had to line up and make an appointment, let alone the Lopez family. Although the other party's family could be ranked among the top families, if they really offended him, he just needed to say the word, and a large number of families would deal with the Lopez family for him. The next day, after finishing his morning training, Gray was thinking about his arrangements for the next 2 days. There were still 2 days before the trial tower opened. He could freely arrange his time during these 2 days. He was thinking about how to spend these 2 days. Go to the Glow study room to read? He thought of the bookstore from yesterday and considered whether he should spend the next 2 days in that bookstore. Brother, let's go. I'll bring you to a good place. Just then, a young man with a slightly chubby face appeared in the inn and found Gray. It was Avery Lenini. He glanced at Kinsa beside him. He had his back to her and was secretly winking at Gray. Obviously, there was a hidden meaning in his words. Gray's heart skipped a beat. He could not help but be interested in the good place mentioned by the young man. He did not go to the Glow study room. Instead, he got into the young man's carriage and left the inn. The carriage made several turns on the streets and traveled for more than half an hour before it finally stopped in front of a 5-story building with a huge plaza in front of the door. The plaza was paved with white jade and was extremely luxurious. Many parts of the 5-story building were smeared with gold powder. It was dazzling. The thick pillars and high eaves gave off a sense of grandeur. It was obvious that this building was built by a famous master architect. There were several tall and muscular men standing in front of the door with their arms crossed and a fierce look on their faces. What was this place? It seemed to be different from the rumored place. Gray looked at Avery Lenini with slight suspicion. A casino. Avery Lenini chuckled and said with a look that said, "What do you think? It's a good place, right?" A casino? Gray looked at Avery Lenini in disbelief. This guy wanted him to send Fod and Kinso away so that he could bring him to a casino. Was this guy's brain short-circuited? Although he had heard rumors about certain places, he had never patronized them. When he saw Avery Lenini winking at him in the inn, he thought that this guy was going to bring him to that kind of place, so he agreed. He did not want to do anything in that kind of place. He just wanted to see it for himself. Of course, even if he was asked to do something in that kind of place, he would not do it. To some extent, he was a clean freak and did not like things that had been cleaned for the umpteenth time. Let's go. Although it was very different from what he had expected, since he was already here, there was no reason not to go in. Moreover, Gray was also curious about places like casinos. He did not know what casinos in this world were like. Entering the casino, all kinds of shouts could be heard. In the hall on the first floor, there were more than 10 huge gambling tables. Each table was surrounded by many people. Among them, there were rich people in luxurious clothes, and there were also ordinary people in ordinary clothes who came to try their luck. Influenced by the atmosphere, they forgot each other's identity and surrounded the tables in a harmonious manner. They shouted and cursed with a crazed look on their faces. Listening to Avery Lenini's long-winded chatter while looking at the gambling tables, Gray easily understood the games played on these tables. Some used cards similar to poker cards to bet with the dealer. Some used turntables to bet on numbers, and some used dice to bet on sizes. What disappointed him was that even with his super memory ability, he couldn't gain much of an advantage in the casino. The casinos in this world were very guarded against the ability of retentive memory, and there was no gambling method that could make full use of his super memory ability. What is she doing here? Suddenly, a woman with a perfect figure and high heels walked down the stairs. Gray looked over and was slightly surprised. The woman was none other than Blanca Manti of the Manti family. Most of the people who came to the casino were men. He really did not expect that a woman would come here. Chapter 678. Don't tell me you really don't know. Hearing Gray's surprise, Avery Lenini looked at Gray in astonishment, his face full of disbelief. Know what? Gray looked at Avery Lenini in confusion. Looks like you really don't know. Avery Lenini slapped his forehead and pretended to be speechless as he explained to Gray. Most of the casinos in the Chaos Territory are owned by the Manti family. As the eldest daughter of the Manti family, it's natural for her to come and inspect the Manti family's properties. Most of the casinos in the Chaos Territory are owned by the Manti family. Gray was stunned. He didn't expect this to be the case. This place was actually owned by the Manti family. However, he couldn't help but be slightly shocked by the wealth of the Manti family. It was obvious how rich the casinos were. Most of the casinos in the Chaos Territory were owned by the Manti family. One could imagine how rich the Manti family was. Just as Gray and Avery Lenini noticed Blanca Manti naturally also noticed Gray and Avery Lenini. After a slight hesitation, she walked over. Both of them were children of top families. Since they met in her family's property, as the owner, she naturally had to go up and greet them. Moreover, the talent and strength displayed by this child of the Leopold family really surprised her. She couldn't help but want to befriend him. I didn't expect to meet you two here. When Blanca Mandy approached the two, a fragrant wind entered their noses. She smiled and greeted the two. She was wearing a long dress inlaid with purple gems and a pair of open-toed high heels. Her slender and graceful figure was outlined by the long dress, making her look even more beautiful. What a coincidence. We heard that there was a casino here and came to take a look. We didn't expect Miss Blanca to be here. Being in such close contact with the goddess of his heart, Avery Lenini's face was slightly flushed. He even stuttered a little, which was completely different from his usual reaction. Hello, Miss Blanca. Gray greeted Blanca and Mandy in a rather normal manner. He had seen a lot of beautiful women, and a few of them were as beautiful as Blanca Manti. Even Kinza, who was beside him, was as beautiful as Brancamanti. Naturally, he wouldn't be as nervous as Avery Lenini, who stuttered. Blancamandi looked at Gray curiously. Under her beauty, some people stuttered due to nervousness, while others pretended to be calm. However, she could tell at a glance that Gray's calmness did not seem to be an act. He was indeed not shocked by her beauty. The smile on her face widened like a blooming lotus flower, causing Avery Lenini's heart to race even faster. "I've always wanted to find a chance to pay you a visit, sir, but I never had the time. Miguel Villa, I apologize for harassing your companions." Blancamandi bowed slightly and said apologetically, "No, that has nothing to do with Miss Blanca." Gray shook his head. The reason why Kenza was harassed was indeed because of Blancamandi, but it was unreasonable to vent his anger on Blancamandi because of such a reason. "We met a few times, but I still don't know your name?" Blancamandi asked. "Gray, just call me Gray." Gray did not mention his surname. If he used the surname of the Leopold family, it would make him feel awkward, and if he used his surname, it would cause unnecessary trouble, so he might as well not say it. "Gentlemen, I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave. Have fun." After summoning a steward and making him in charge of receiving Gray and Avery Lenini, Blancamandi bade farewell and left. At this moment, Avery Lenini's feverish mind finally cooled down as he asked in puzzlement, "Why didn't Miss Blanca ask for my name just now?" Gray glanced at him and answered perfunctorily, "It should be because she already knows your name." "Yes, Miss Blanca must already know my name. I'm so famous that even Miss Blanca knows my name." Avery Lenini's slightly chubby face suddenly became excited, and his eyes widened, obviously falling into some kind of fantasy. After leaving the casino, Blancamandi rode a carriage for more than half an hour and appeared in front of an elegant shop. The signboard on the door said Globe Bookstore, which was the bookstore Gray had visited yesterday. "Cousin, you're here." Seeing Blancamandi's arrival, a black-haired young woman came out to greet her and held her hand affectionately. Following the black-haired young woman into the bookstore, there was a middle-aged woman and a middle-aged man inside. Blancamandi greeted them when she saw them. "Auntie, uncle." In fact, the owner of this bookstore was the middle-aged woman, Ellen Mandy, who was her father's sister. She had hurried over when her father sent someone to ask her to come to the bookstore. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" After greeting them, she looked at the middle-aged man in confusion. As far as she knew, this uncle of hers was very busy. People could line up for years to ask him to make medicine, so he rarely came here. "I have something to do, so I canceled today's appointment. I called you here today to ask for your help." The middle-aged man, Roman Dodge, said lightly. From his tone, one couldn't tell that he was from a powerful family. "You want my help?" "Uncle, just tell me what you need. As long as the Manti family can do it, we will do it," Blancamandi said sincerely. Blancamandi said sincerely. Not to mention her relationship with the middle-aged woman, Ellen Mandy. Just based on the middle-aged man's identity and status, she would definitely do her best to help him. "I want to borrow the power of the Manti family in Chaos City to help me find someone," Roman Dodge said with a slight frown. "Find someone?" Blancamandi was surprised. At the same time, she couldn't help but feel curious. With her uncle's identity and status, what kind of person was he looking for? "Do you have a portrait of him? If you don't have a portrait, describe his external features. The more detailed, the better." "It's a black-haired young man. He should be about your age. He's about this tall." "All right. There's an old man and a young woman with him. The young woman's figure is very similar to yours," Ellen Mandy said as she recalled. As Ellen Mandy described, Blancamandi felt more and more familiar. When Ellen Mandy said that the young woman's figure was very similar to hers, Blancamandi's expression became strange. "Cousin, what's wrong?" the black-haired young woman, Ellen Dodge, asked when she saw Blancamandi's strange expression. "I think I know who you're looking for," Blancamandi said in a strange voice. "Really?" Roman Dodge was overjoyed and couldn't help asking, "Do you know where he lives?" "I still need to investigate." "But, Uncle, why are you looking for him? Did he offend you?" Blancamandi asked hesitantly. From the description, The person they were looking for should be Gray. She couldn't help but feel a little troubled. The potential that Gray had shown made her want to befriend him. But if he had really offended her uncle and couldn't be reconciled, then she could only give up. One was a top alchemist whose name had shaken the Chaos territory and the surrounding territories. The other was someone who only had potential. It was obvious which side she should choose. No. Yesterday, I discovered that this person has a photographic memory. Moreover, his level is very high. Your uncle wants to take him in as a disciple. That's why he asked you to help find him. Ellen Mandy shook her head. He has an extremely high level of eidetic memory, so good that my uncle wants to take him in as a disciple. Blanca Mandy was shocked. She naturally knew what level of alchemist her uncle, Roman Dodge, was. He was an alchemist who could make level 6 magic potions. Even the Chaos Temple had to treat him with respect. With such a great reputation, he naturally didn't lack people who wanted to be his disciple. However, they were all rejected because he didn't care about their talent. Now, he wanted to take Gray in as a disciple. It wasn't hard to imagine how good Gray's talent in alchemy was. Not only does he have the talent to mix 3 elements, but he also has such a high talent in alchemy. Blanca Mandy took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in her heart. In her heart, she wanted to befriend this person even more. If this person really became her uncle's disciple, he would definitely be an ally with great potential. In terms of potential, he wouldn't be inferior to George Lopez or Landry Gummo. Cousin, do you know this person? The black-haired young woman, Ellie Dodge, looked at Blanca Mandy and asked, Kind of, but I'm not too familiar with him. I've only met him a few times. It's a coincidence that I met him in the casino just now. Blanca Mandy said with a wry smile. In a casino? Let's go to the casino. The middle-aged man's eyes lit up and immediately decided. Not long after, the library closed early. The 4 of them took a carriage and rushed to the casino. They've already left, but when they arrived at the casino, they found that Gray and Avery Lenini had already left. For a place like a casino, Gray just wanted to see it. He didn't think about making a fortune through this place, so after seeing it for a while and trying a few rounds, he left. It seems that we can only investigate his residence first. But Uncle, you don't have to worry. He will go to the Chaos Temple in 2 days. I'll definitely meet him then. Blanca Mandy said helplessly. Chapter 679. 2 days later, Gray came to the Chaos Temple again. This time he was alone, because the place he was heading to was an important place of the Chaos Temple. Fod and Kinshaw were not allowed to enter, so he did not let them come with him. After being notified, Gray entered the depths of the Chaos Temple under the guidance of a guard, heading towards the Golden Tower at the center. After passing through no less than a few checkpoints guarded by experts, he finally arrived in front of the Golden Tower and appeared in a huge square. The stone used in the square was a kind of stone known as golden jade. Not only was it sturdy, but there were also strands of gold inside. The square, which was completely paved with this kind of stone, was faintly golden and looked extremely magnificent. The trial tower in the distance was also entirely built with the same kind of golden jade. It pierced through the clouds and looked extremely majestic, like a huge sword piercing the sky. Gray was not the first person to arrive. When he arrived, there were already many people in the square. Among them were people like Gray who had obtained a quota to enter the trial tower, such as Landry Gummo and George Lopez. There were also people with the symbol of the Chaos Temple on their clothes. They should be disciples of the Chaos Temple. Among these people, there was a young man who was particularly eye-catching. He had fiery red hair and was faintly surrounded by many disciples of the Chaos Temple. He was one of the most outstanding disciples of the Chaos Temple of this generation. In terms of talent, he was only inferior to the Chaos Holy Sun. And this young man was one of the 3 disciples of the Chaos Temple that Gray had seen when he clashed with Miguel Vega. Looks like my intuition was not wrong. Seeing Gray come to the square under the guidance of the guard, the corners of Julio's mouth rose into an undetectable smile. After watching the other party's duel, he had a faint feeling that they would meet again. And now, this premonition had come true. They had indeed met again, and in an important place of the Chaos Temple. Senior brother Julio, you've seen him before? Seeing Julio's gaze stop on Gray, a disciple of the Chaos Temple asked curiously. You can say that I've seen him once. Julio said faintly, and then looked away. His attention to Gray was just to pass the boring waiting time. It did not mean that he paid much attention to Gray. It was not yet time for the trial tower to open, so Gray found a corner and waited. He was not familiar with the disciples of the Chaos Temple or the disciples of the other top clans who had obtained the qualifications to enter the trial tower, so he did not go up and greet them. Gray did not come forward to greet them. Landry Ngomo and George Lopez were the most powerful family members among the top families. Naturally, they would not take the initiative to greet Gray. Therefore, there was no one around Gray. He was free now, and he listened to the conversation between the disciples of the Chaos Temple like a bystander, and he learned quite a bit from it. There were a total of 35 floors in the trial tower. There is a deeper meaning to this number. The reason there were so many floors was that the basic abilities of the elements, souls, and bodies added up to exactly 35. All of the law abilities were a mixture of 5 of the 35 basic abilities. Building the trial tower with 35 floors was the creator's ambition to control all 35 abilities. However, this was destined to be a wild ambition that could never be fulfilled. It was extremely difficult to become a rule-level powerhouse by mastering the laws of 5 abilities, let alone mastering 35 abilities and mastering a total of 7 laws. Moreover, the books that Gray had read during this period had mentioned that according to ancient legends, when someone could master all 35 abilities and form 7 nomological abilities, they would obtain the power of a god and become a godlike existence. However, so far there had not been any rule-level powerhouse who had reached that step. In fact, most rule-level powerhouses had only mastered 1 or 2 laws until their deaths. There were very few people who could master 3 or more laws. From this, it was not difficult to see how difficult it was to master more laws than a rule-level powerhouse. Even Gray, who had the ability to transform, was not sure if he could master 35 types of abilities and form 7 types of laws. The rule level was too far away from him. With his current realm, it was very difficult for him to guess that level. Moreover, many of these 35 abilities were almost extinct and had not appeared for hundreds of thousands of years. He might not be able to gather all 35 basic abilities. Suddenly, the conversation in the square fell silent, as if all the sounds had been isolated. Gray looked up in confusion and saw a brown-haired young woman walking over. The young woman was tall and had an extraordinary temperament. She had a pair of long legs that could make one's imagination run wild. She had a slender waist and a firm chest that displayed perfect curves. This was a woman with a perfect figure. Her beautiful face gave her perfect figure a soul, making her even more agile and alluring. This woman was Branka Manti. Those who had obtained the qualifications to enter the trial tower, whether they were from the Chaos Temple or the top families, were not too old. They were all under 30 years old because the trial tower had a limit of 30 years old. Those who were under 30 years old were young and full of vigor. It was not difficult to understand why they would suddenly fall silent when they saw such a perfect woman. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of long boots stepping on the stone floor continued to ring out. Branka Manti walked over at a moderate speed. Many gazes followed her movements. At this moment, she was the indisputable focus of attention. She's walking toward that guy. Suddenly, someone realized that Branka Manti was moving toward Gray, who was standing alone. Their eyes could not help but become jealous. Although the people present were all people with strength and status, and would not do anything to Gray because of this, the trace of jealousy in their hearts was involuntary and could not be suppressed. Young Mistress Branka. Gray was slightly surprised that she would walk toward him, but he still greeted her calmly. As for the jealous gazes that were directed at him, he directly ignored them. Although he could feel the jealous gazes, he did not sense any hostility. He could understand why these people were jealous, so he chose to ignore them. Mr. Gray, I've been looking for you for the past 2 days. Branka Manti said with a hint of playfulness. It was hard to tell if she was telling the truth or not. Are you joking, young Mistress Branka? Gray was a little unsure if she was telling the truth, so he asked in a doubtful tone, "I'm not joking. In order to find you, the Manti family shut down most of their businesses in Chaos City. In the end, they still couldn't find you." Branka Manti put away the playfulness on her face and said with a hint of resignation in her voice, Why are you looking for me? I only played a few rounds at your Manti family's casino before leaving. I didn't cause any trouble." Gray smiled bitterly. The first thing that came to his mind was what he did at the casino that caused the Manti family to be unhappy with him. In fact, if his super memory ability could be put to use, he was indeed prepared to make some money at the Manti family's casino. However, the casino seemed to be very guarded against the eidetic memory ability, so he did not have the ability to do it. Hence, he left after playing a few rounds. Logically speaking, the Manti family should not have mobilized so many people to find him, but the only place he could think of to provoke the Manti family was this place. "Don't worry, I'm not looking for trouble with you." Branka Manti could not help but burst into laughter when she saw Gray's bitter smile. Her laughter immediately made the jealous gazes that were looking at them from not far away. Not only did he know such a beautiful woman, but they also seemed to have a good relationship. There was even a hint of flirting. Many people wished they could replace Gray at this moment. "Let me ask you something. Did you go to the Globe bookstore 3 days ago?" Branka Manti asked. "I did go there once. What's wrong?" Knowing that the Manti family did not intend to find trouble with him, Gray breathed a sigh of relief. Unlike the Vika family, the Manti family was definitely a giant existence. It was absolutely impossible for him to compete with them now. If he really had a bad relationship with such a family, the only thing he could do was to run away. "That person is really you. Do you have eidetic memory ability?" Although she was very sure that the person was Gray, she did not dare to be 100% sure. After all, there was no portrait and only a verbal description. Now it was really confirmed. "Yes, I do. What's the matter?" From Branka Manti's tone, it should be because of his eidetic memory ability. Gray was slightly puzzled and asked, "I can't tell you what it is yet. After this trial is over, I will go and find you. Can you tell me where you are staying at the hotel?" Branka Manti shook her head. Although her uncle wanted to take Han's son as a student, it had not been confirmed yet. If she said it now and it did not work out, it would be very awkward. "That is not a problem. I am staying at." Gray nodded and told her where he was staying. After Branka Manti, a few more people arrived. When it was around 8 in the morning, a dozen people with the symbol of Chaos Holy Palace appeared. There were old people and middle-aged people. There were men and women. Without exception, their presence was very scary. It was like an abyss. If Gray was not mistaken, everyone was an Annihilation class elite. Many of them were not as simple as normal Annihilation classes. 25 Chaos Holy Palace students and 5 children of top family. "Everyone is here. Open the trial tower." The one in the middle of this group was an old man with a ruddy complexion. He commanded loudly. Instantly, more than 10 people beside him flew towards the trial pagoda. Each of them pressed their hands on a part of the runes on the trial pagoda and injected their blood power. As a large amount of blood force poured in, the huge door of the training pagoda slowly opened, and a white light shone out from within. The trial tower had officially opened. Chapter 680. The giant stone door slowly moved aside. A white light came out of the trial tower. It was white, holy, and pure. It was not tainted by any other color. It was like the 2 doors were connected to another world. At this moment, Gray and the others who were about to enter the Tower of Trials couldn't help but look at the stone door with slight excitement. The trial tower had a miraculous effect of increasing one's power. Everyone who entered the trial tower would have their power increased by a lot. They would have received a big boost. Most people's levels would increase by 1 level. It would save them a few years of practice time. Some of the people who were strong and talented could increase their levels by 2 levels. Some of the more talented people could increase their levels by 3 levels. Chaos Holy Palace had a very talented Chaos Holy Son who was over 30 years old. 5 years ago, he had entered Chaos Holy Palace and reached the 30th floor. He had increased his levels by 3 levels. Increasing one's level was not the only benefit of the trial tower. According to rumors, there were some mysterious rewards in the trial tower. Some of the rewards were enough to last a lifetime. The rewards were kept secret by Chaos Holy Palace. They were not allowed to reveal them to others. Only the people who received them knew what they were. Ka! The trial tower's opening was very difficult. Even though there were 10 Annihilation class elites pouring in blood power to activate it, the giant stone door still opened very slowly. So, the old man with a red face frowned. In the next moment, he appeared next to a mark on the trial tower. He put his hand on a mark node. So fast, Gray's face was cold. In that instant of movement, he did not see any trace of movement. He could not even tell if the old man was too fast or if he had mastered space rules to teleport. Although he was confident that his current combat power was enough to fight the warrior of destruction. If his opponent was the old man in front of him, he would have no chance of winning in the face of the other party's terrifying speed. He might not even be able to escape using teleportation. Using space teleportation required time. With the old man's speed, he did not have the time to use space teleportation. This old man is an Annihilation class. I am afraid very few people can compete with him. Gray guessed. He even suspected that the old man was a 6th-tier Annihilation class elite that was only one step away from Rule class. Rumble. As the old man pressed his hand on one of the runic nodes of the trial tower and poured his blood power into it, the stone door began to move faster. Soon, the stone door expanded to allow more than 10 people to enter side by side. When it expanded to such an extent, the stone door stopped moving. Obviously, the stone door had been opened to its limit. Everyone get in quick. The ruddy-faced old man turned to look at Gray and the other 30 participants of the trial tower and instructed. Upon hearing the order, Gray and the others didn't dare to hesitate. Facing the white light, they quickly rushed into the stone door. Not long after they rushed into the stone door behind them rumbled and closed again. This is the interior of the trial tower. At this time, what appeared in front of Gray's eyes was a huge space that was as bright as day, even though there was no light. The reason why it was as bright as day was because the surrounding walls, floors, and ceilings were all built with naturally glowing white stones. Lustrous white stone was a kind of stone material with extremely high compatibility with rune patterns. It was an extremely precious rune material, but he hadn't expected that the entire interior of the trial tower would be built with this kind of stone material. The wealth of the Chaos Temple could be clearly seen. The big space's ceiling had many beautiful carvings. The carvings were all different. There was a scary blood beast with a lot of power. There was a ruined city. There was a mountain of dead bodies that had fallen under the claws of a rare beast. There was also a scary elite with a lot of power. The carvings formed a complete story. A scary blood beast with a lot of power left an ancient forest and came to the human world. Everywhere it passed, it left behind a broken land. Cities were destroyed one after another, and millions of people died. Some experts were angry and wanted to kill this terrifying blood beast, but they died under the claws of the terrifying blood beast and turned into piles of white bones under its claws. Just when everyone was in despair, a terrifying expert with monstrous power appeared and fought with the terrifying blood fiend for several days and nights before finally killing it. The powerful elite felt the misery of the ordinary people here, so he guarded this place. With him as the center, palaces and cities appeared. This should be the background of the Chaos Holy Palace and the City of Chaos. The powerful elite should be the founder of the Chaos Holy Palace. He was a powerful elite who had mastered the rules and stood at the peak of the world. 1, 2, 3. On the ceiling of the huge space were reliefs, and on the walls of the huge space there were many tunnels. Gray's gaze swept over them, and he found that the number of tunnels was exactly 30, which was exactly the same as the number of people they had entered at this time. Just as he was looking around, there were already people walking into these tunnels. A disciple of the Chaos Holy Palace walked into a tunnel. Then, at the entrance of the tunnel, a white translucent barrier appeared, completely blocking the entrance. Only one person could enter each tunnel. Hum hum hum. As more and more people walked into the tunnels, more and more translucent white barriers appeared at the entrances. Beside Gray, Blanca-Mandy nodded at Gray and walked into a tunnel. Finally, her graceful figure disappeared into the tunnel. Gray also walked into a tunnel. As soon as he walked in, a translucent white barrier appeared behind him. He reached out and pressed it. The barrier was very sturdy. Even with his 4th-tier king-level power, he couldn't move it at all. He didn't hesitate and walked into the tunnel. He couldn't help but feel curious. What was the test in this tower? Was it the same as the tower on the floating island? Now that he thought about it, the floating island was probably a similar place. That's right. I wonder if there will be restrictions on magic weapons like the floating islands. Thinking of the floating island, Gray stopped. He pulled out the sword at his waist and poured the power of the blood beast into it. It's really restricted. The power of the blood beast that he poured into the sword didn't increase. It was obvious that the amplification effect of the magical weapon was restricted. My armor and space items are also restricted. Gray checked the blue ring of his armor and the purple ring of his space item. He found that the armor couldn't be activated, and the purple ring couldn't open space. It was also restricted. I can't open the purple ring, which means that I can't use my ability to control corpses. My combat power is undoubtedly weakened. Gray frowned slightly. After a while, he relaxed and walked forward. Because he couldn't use his ability to control corpses, his combat power was weakened. Fortunately, he had the Rule of Time ability. With the Rule of Time ability, his combat power was also greatly enhanced, allowing him to easily fight across several levels. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After walking forward for more than 10 meters, a large number of sharp sounds suddenly rang out. Gray looked in the direction of the sound and saw a large number of black arrows whistling toward him. The source of the black arrows was the wall in front of him. Golden veins appeared on the wall, and as these golden veins appeared, black arrows condensed out of thin air and shot towards him. Crack! Crack! Gray's expression didn't change much in the face of the large number of black arrows that were shooting toward him. He gently waved his hand, and a large amount of white cold air spread out. All the black arrows were frozen and fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. It's only at the first stage of King Tier. That's normal. After all, this is just the beginning. Glancing at the completely shattered black arrow that had fallen to the ground, Gray walked towards the depths of the tunnel at an unhurried pace. Any black arrow that was shot at him would be frozen and shattered by the cold air around him when it was still a dozen meters away from him. He easily passed through the tunnel with the golden patterns. As he passed through, the golden patterns that were originally lit up dimmed, and the black arrows stopped being produced. As he continued forward, Gray encountered several runic mechanisms in succession. There was a runic mechanism that spat out acid, a runic mechanism that spat out fireballs, and a runic mechanism that released lightning. However, he easily blocked them all. From beginning to end, he only used his ice ability. Since he was at the 4th stage of King Tier, even if he only used his ice ability, he could block these attacks that were only at the 1st stage of King Tier. In front of him, the path came to an end. A stone staircase appeared in front of Gray. This should be the staircase that led to the next floor. Next to the staircase, there was a 2-meter-tall, ape-shaped beast guarding it. Thump, thump, thump. This ape-shaped beast was earthy yellow and full of the texture of rocks. When it saw Gray, it immediately moved its rocky body toward Gray. Gray's expression did not change much. The white cold air shrouded him. Wherever it passed, the ground would be covered in ice. It was as if he was the master of ice and snow. When the ape-shaped beast was dozens of meters away from him, the surface of its body was already covered in ice. When the ape-shaped beast was more than 10 meters away from him, it was completely frozen by the cold air and could not move at all. Pata! Gray snapped his fingers, and the round, ferocious beast that had been frozen by the cold air shattered in an instant, turning into countless pieces of gravel. It's completely made of rock. Walking to the gravel that the ape-shaped beast had turned into, Gray looked at it. The ape-shaped beast looked like a rune puppet made of rock, but it was not. Its internal structure did not have the structure of a rune puppet. It was completely made of rock. This was probably a blood beast ability produced by a runic array. However, it was different from ordinary blood beasts. This blood beast ability could attack repeatedly. Its power is a little higher than the rune mechanism in the tunnel. It seems that the rune mechanism's power is strengthened in key places like the staircase. With a rough guess in his heart, Gray walked past the gravel that the ape-shaped beast had turned into and stepped on the stairs to the second floor. Gray didn't receive any attacks, so he went up to the second floor without any obstructions. However, when he set foot on the second floor, a sudden change occurred. Buzz! A trembling sound suddenly entered his body without warning. His body involuntarily shivered slightly. It was as if he had suddenly entered a cold environment from a warm environment. His body involuntarily produced a stress response and shivered. Chapter 681. What's going on? The trembling came and went quickly. By the time Gray realized what had happened, it had already disappeared. Gray's expression was one of bewilderment as he hurriedly checked his body's condition. That moment of trembling was clearly not a reaction caused by the change in temperature. This was something he was certain of. Ever since he had obtained the ice ability, he had gained an extremely high resistance to the cold. He had become immune to the cold. My blood power has recovered. Is this the secret of the trial tower to increase my strength? After a moment, Gray's attention shifted away from his body. His eyes flashed. The test on the first level of the training pagoda was extremely easy for him now. Even so, the blood force would still be consumed. After the inexplicable trembling, not only was the blood force that he had used up completely restored, but it had also increased by a certain margin. His physical fitness had also improved by a lot. If he was not wrong, if he were to cultivate the blood technique now, his cultivation speed would definitely be much faster than this morning. That strange trembling should be the key to increasing one's strength in the trial tower. It was because of that strange trembling that his blood power and physical fitness had increased by a large margin. The floating island increases one's strength through the red mist, while the trial tower increases one's strength through this strange trembling. Gray could not help but compare the trial tower and the floating island. He realized that the two methods of increasing one's strength were completely different, but both were equally mysterious and unpredictable. Now, he was almost certain that the floating island was very likely the trial ground of the temple. He just did not know if the temple still existed. Even such an important place like the trial ground had been left unguarded. Standing on the second level, Gray saw a winding tunnel that was just like the one on the first level. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with his body other than a slight increase in strength, Gray strode deeper into the tunnel. Crackle. Whoosh. 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 Lightning, metal blades, blazing flames. As Gray moved forward, one rune mechanism after another was triggered and attacked Gray. The power was still at the first level of the king level, but compared to the first level, it was clearly a little stronger. For the current Gray, this kind of rune mechanism naturally did not pose any obstruction. He easily arrived at the end of the passageway and saw the stone staircase that led to the third level. Beside the stone staircase was a 2-meter-long, dirt-yellow giant wolf. Just like on the first level, it took the initiative to attack Gray. The result was obvious. The giant wolf turned into an ice sculpture about 10 meters away from Gray. It was completely frozen, and with a snap of Gray's fingers, it turned into stone. Gray followed the stone staircase to the third level. Just as he set foot on the third level, the same thing happened as when he set foot on the second level. A trembling sound enveloped him without warning, and his body involuntarily trembled. When the trembling stopped, he found that the blood force that he had lost had recovered, and the total amount of blood force and physical fitness had increased by a certain margin again. Gray, who was already mentally prepared, did not stop to check his body. He walked straight into the new tunnel that appeared. The fourth level, the fifth level, the sixth level, the ninth level. Relying on his valiant strength, Gray quickly ascended to the ninth level. The rune mechanisms on each level were stronger than the ones below. On the fourth level, The rune mechanism's power had increased to the second level of the king level. On the seventh level, the rune mechanism's power had increased to the third level of the king level. With each level, Gray's realm would increase. When he reached the ninth level, Gray's realm had increased from the initial fourth level of the king level to the limit of the fourth level of the king level. He could already feel a bottleneck. Once he broke through this bottleneck, his body would undergo a qualitative change, and his strength would increase by leaps and bounds. He still passed through the ninth level without any hindrance. Following the stone staircase, he set foot on the 10th level. Hum! A trembling sound enveloped Gray. After a moment of stalemate, a layer of the bottleneck was pierced like a balloon. With this layer of the bottleneck broken, Gray's body and blood force suddenly underwent a drastic change. His body was rapidly strengthening, and whether it was his muscles or bones, they were all rapidly becoming stronger. His blood force was rapidly increasing. It was like a dry lotus pond encountering a rainstorm. The amount of rainwater was rapidly increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The trembling sound disappeared in an extremely short period of time, but the changes in Gray's body and blood force did not stop. They were still rapidly increasing. After a while, the growth stopped. At this time, Gray's blood force had increased by several times compared to before. I've reached the magic light realm. With a light punch, a sonic boom immediately resounded in the air. If not for the sturdy trial tower, just the wind pressure produced would have been enough to blow down a house. Feeling that his strength had increased by several times, Gray was extremely certain that he had now reached the magic light realm. The trial tower is indeed a good place. No wonder top-notch clans would not hesitate to turn against each other for a place in the trial tower. Originally, even with the assistance of the Blood Moon Potion, Gray would have needed at least half a year to reach the magic light realm. After all, a potion like the Blood Moon Potion could not be used continuously because its effects were too strong. There was an extremely long interval between each use. Meanwhile, the trial tower had saved him half a year's time, allowing him to reach the magic light rank half a year earlier. Moreover, this wasn't all. After all, he had only just reached the 10th floor. The trial tower had a total of 35 floors. Of course, even a monstrous holy son of the Chaos Temple had only reached the 30th level in the end. It was almost impossible for him to reach the 35th level, and even the 30th level would be very difficult. As the holy son of the Chaos Temple, the amount of resources he had cultivated to this point was definitely unimaginable to Gray. With such terrifying resources, the holy son of the Chaos Temple should have surpassed Gray when he entered the trial tower. Although Gray's strength had rapidly increased after entering the Origin World and obtaining resources, he should not be able to catch up to the holy son of the Chaos Temple in a short period of time. In terms of ability, as the holy son of the Chaos Temple, the holy son of the Chaos Temple must have grasped the power of laws. In a situation where he could not use his ability to control corpses, Gray's advantage was not too obvious. Objectively speaking, Gray's battle strength was very likely to be weaker than the holy son of the Chaos Temple. The holy son of the Chaos Temple could reach the 30th level, but Gray estimated that it would be rather difficult for him to reach the 30th level. The reason for such a situation was not because he was inferior to the other party, but because the resources he had obtained so far were far inferior to the other parties. If he could obtain the same cultivation resources as the other party, even if he didn't need all of it, even if he only had a tenth of it, his current battle strength would definitely surpass the other party when they first entered the trial tower. Let's continue. Following the passage, Gray walked forward. Swish, swish, swish. Suddenly, green wind blades appeared one after another. Each of them was as solid as a green jade sculpture. They slashed towards Gray, and the air was filled with ear-piercing whistling sounds. Crack, crack, crack. The cold air spread and enveloped Gray's surroundings. All of the green wind blades froze and fell to the ground when they were still a dozen meters away from Gray. It's at the 4th level of the King's stage. Gray judged as he continued to walk forward, allowing the green wind blades to be frozen by the cold air. If not for the fact that he had reached the first level of magic light, it would not have been easy for him to block these wind blades with the cold air alone. If he went up a few more levels, he would probably have to use his mixed ability to block the attacks of the runic mechanisms along the way. Using his mixed ability would definitely increase the consumption of his blood force. Fortunately, his blood force would also recover when he ascended to the next level. Otherwise, in this trial tower where even spatial items couldn't be opened, the lack of blood force would seriously drag him down. 11th level, 12th level, 13th level, 19th level. When he reached the 13th level, the runic mechanism's power increased again, reaching the first level of magic light, which was the same as Gray's current level. Gray had to use his icy wind blades to pass this level. When he reached the 16th level, the runic mechanism's power increased again, reaching the second level of magic light, which was higher than Gray's current level. Gray had to use his black mist and three-elemental mixed ability to pass this level. When he reached the 19th level, the runic mechanism's power increased again, reaching the third level of magic light. Gray had to use his four-elemental mixed ability, a dark green mist, to pass this level. At this point, even someone as strong as Gray felt some pressure. Other than his ability to control corpses, which he could not use for the time being, he had already used all his other abilities. However, in contrast, Gray felt that his level had once again reached a bottleneck, once again touching a barrier. This was the barrier between the first level of magic light and the second level of magic light. If he could break through this barrier, he would break through to the second level of magic light. Looking at the stone stairs leading to the 20th level, Gray did not move quickly, but his steps were steady. Buzz! When Gray's foot reached the 20th level, the trembling that he had already experienced many times once again appeared in his body. This time, the time it took to appear was much longer than before. At the beginning, the time it took to appear wasn't even a second, but now, it was several seconds. Outside the trial tower, when Gray stepped onto the 20th level, the runic patterns on the 20th level suddenly lit up. Seeing the runic patterns on the 20th level light up, the dozen or so Chaos Temple's powerhouses couldn't help but smile. Julio has reached the 20th level. To be able to reach the 20th level so quickly, Julio's progress in the past year is not small. Who knows, he might even be able to reach the 26th level. In the Chaos Temple, the most outstanding disciple who had entered the trial tower this time was Julio, a core disciple. Therefore, they naturally believed that the one to reach the 20th level would definitely be Julio. As for Gray and the other disciples from the 5 greatest clans, they didn't consider them at all. Although the disciples of the 3 strongest clans were outstanding, they were only close to the upper echelons of the Chaos Temple's disciples. Naturally, they couldn't compare to Julio. Chapter 682. Crackle, crackle. The rapid metamorphosis made Gray's body rumble like thunder. It was as if there were rumbling thunder roaring within his body. His muscles, bones, and even his hair were quickly becoming stronger, denser, and sturdier. The blood force vortex in his body spun rapidly. As it spun, the blood force vortex grew larger and more solid. The metamorphosis only came to an end after over 10 minutes, and Gray's power level had completely stabilized at the second tier of magic light. I've reached the second tier of magic light, but it's a pity that I can't improve the power of my time rule ability for now. The bloodlines that made up the time rule ability were all magic light bloodlines, and when Gray reached the magic light tier, those bloodlines had already been developed to their limits. As those magic light tier bloodlines were developed to their limits, the power of his time rule ability naturally also reached its limit, unless he replaced it with a bloodline of a higher tier than the magic light tier. It wasn't that Gray hadn't considered upgrading his bloodline in the Tower of Trials. In fact, he'd been planning to do so from the very beginning. 2 days before the Tower of Trials opened, he'd visited several of the largest blood shops in Chaos City that sold blood. He had collected all of the disaster-grade blood beast blood that he needed for his time rule ability, which consisted of ice and fire-type blood beast blood, wood-type blood beast blood, and earth-type blood beast blood. Among them, the earth-type blood beast blood was prepared for his time rule ability, and he was going to replace the original magic light tier Blood Beast Blood. It was almost impossible to find 4-type disaster grade Blood Beast Blood. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of finding 3-type disaster grade Blood Beast Blood, but unfortunately, he hadn't had enough time, so he couldn't find any. As such, he could only settle for 2-type disaster grade Blood Beast Blood. He had already made plans to consume the blood of the disaster-level blood fiends in the Trial Tower to undergo his transformation. Unfortunately, the Trial Tower not only restricted the use of mana weapons, but it also restricted the use of spatial items. As a result, he could not take out the blood to undergo his transformation. If it weren't for the fact that the mist monkey he had swallowed was a disaster-grade blood fiend, and its bloodline was at the disaster grade, he wouldn't have been able to advance any further because his bloodline had reached its limit. It's good to not consume the blood in the Trial Tower. After all, the Trial Tower is an important place of the Chaos Temple. Perhaps the Chaos Temple has some sort of method to monitor the Trial Tower. After comforting himself in his heart, Gray walked forward along the passageway. Soon, he triggered the rune mechanism. Monstrous flames spread out and surged toward him. Just like the 19th floor, although the power of the runic mechanisms on the 20th floor had increased, it was still at the 3rd level of magic light. Using the dark green mist, which was a mixture of 4 elements, Gray quickly passed through this floor. Just as Gray entered the 21st floor, a red-haired young man stepped onto the 20th floor. A trembling sound enveloped the red-haired young man. The red-haired young man's realm had stabilized after advancing by a level. Before this, his realm had already advanced by a level, reaching the 3rd level of magic light. Since he had already reached the 3rd level of magic light, it was obviously more difficult for him to advance compared to Gray. Therefore, although he had reached the 20th floor like Gray, he was still a little short and couldn't advance a level for the 2nd time. I should be the first person to enter the 20th floor. The red-haired young man's mouth curved into a smile. There was a trace of pride and arrogance on his face. Naturally, he was Julio, whom the Chaos Temple's experts outside the Trial Tower had placed high hopes on. As one of the most outstanding disciples of the Chaos Temple, he was highly valued by the higher-ups of the Chaos Temple. He was also the target of many disciples of the Chaos Temple. Although all kinds of glory didn't make him arrogant, it was inevitable that he would become frivolous when he was young. The other disciples are no match for me, and it's even more impossible for the top clans. This time, my only opponent is myself. Fine, let's see which floor I can reach in the end. Looking at the tunnel, he confidently strode into the tunnel. From his point of view, there was no one who could compete with him in the Trial Tower. His only competitor was himself. Stepping on the stone stairs, Gray reached the 21st floor. With a trembling sound, his realm of magic light increased by another level. He didn't pay too much attention to the increase in his realm. Following the passage, he walked for more than 10 meters. In front of him, a golden pattern lit up, and there was a whistling sound that attacked him. Swish, swish, swish. It was a sharp blade made of water. The high compression gave these sharp blades a terrifying cutting power. Being locked on by these sharp blades, Gray actually felt a piercing pain on his skin. One could imagine how powerful these high-pressure blades were. Whoosh! A dark green mist spread out in front of Gray, almost covering the entire passage to meet the high-pressure blades. Chi, chi, chi. The dark green mist was very corrosive. When the high-pressure blades hit the dark green mist, they were immediately enveloped by the dark green mist. They were quickly corroded by the dark green mist and finally disappeared completely. However, facing such powerful high-pressure blades, the dark green mist was quickly consumed. After a wave of high-pressure blades attacked, the dark green mist was completely exhausted. Its power has increased to the 4th level of magic light. Gray's expression became serious. Compared to the 20th floor, the rune mechanism on the 21st floor was once again a level higher. It went from the 3rd level of magic light to the 4th level of magic light. It was comparable to his current 4-elemental hybrid dark green mist. Because of this, after a wave of attacks, the dark green mist was completely exhausted. It's not that I can't pass through with a four-elemental hybrid dark green mist, but if I want to pass through quickly, I'll have to use the law of time. After thinking for a bit, Gray immediately made a decision. In order to reach the higher floors, he had to pass through each floor in the most effortless way possible. Swish, swish, swish. At this moment, the high-pressure blades attacked again. The air was easily torn apart, and the sharp blades made Gray's skin tingle. Moreover, their speed was extremely terrifying, exceeding the speed of sound. In the blink of an eye, they were already close to Gray. Buzz! Purple light enveloped Gray. In an instant, with Gray as the center, the flow of time in the area around him was several times faster than in the surroundings. Under this abnormal flow of time, Gray's reaction speed and his own speed were several times faster. He gently took a step to the left and dodged a high-pressure sharp blade that was whistling towards him. The high-pressure sharp blade brushed past him. He took a step to the right and returned to his original position, dodging another high-pressure blade whistling towards him. In Gray's eyes, the high-pressure sharp blades, which should have been flying at high speed, became extremely slow, and he could easily dodge them. Gray passed through this section of the passageway, as if he was taking a stroll. As he passed through, the runic lines that lit up dimmed, and the high-pressure blades no longer appeared. Continuing forward, Gray encountered snake-like bolts of lightning. Every single bolt was only as thick as an adult's arm, but the power they possessed was extremely terrifying. If they were regular bolts of lightning, every single one of them would probably be enough to create a sea of lightning. However, in front of Gray's speed, these lightning bolts were like high-pressure blades formed from water. Although they were powerful, they could not hit Gray, and Gray passed through them easily. After passing through the runic mechanisms of ice and strong corrosive acid, Gray finally arrived at the stairs that led to the 22nd floor. Thump, thump, thump. A tiger beast that was covered in black iron pounced at Gray. However, Gray did not fight with it at all. With a slight turn, he avoided the tiger beast and climbed up the stairs. As he climbed up the stairs, the tiger beast seemed to have lost its target, and it returned to the side of the stairs and stopped. Climbing up the stairs, Gray reached the 22nd floor. The situation that he had experienced many times appeared once again. A trembling sound covered him, and his cultivation level increased once again. Gray's eyes suddenly lit up when he sensed the increase in strength. According to this increase, I might be able to increase another level before reaching the 30th floor. With his current strength, it was very difficult for him to reach the 30th level, so he didn't have any hope of increasing his cultivation by 3 levels. However, the current rate of improvement made him see hope again. Perhaps he didn't need to reach the 30th level to increase his cultivation by 1 more level. The reason why the sacred sun of the Chaos Temple only increased by 3 levels after reaching the 30th floor was that when he entered the trial tower, his cultivation level was already quite high. The further one went in cultivation, the more difficult it was to increase one's cultivation level. Therefore, the sacred sun of the Chaos Temple only increased by 3 levels after reaching the 30th floor. Gray's cultivation level, when he entered the trial tower, was only at the 4th stage of the King Realm. He was definitely not as high as the sacred sun of the Chaos Temple, so it was completely possible for him to increase his cultivation level by 3 levels before reaching the 30th floor. With the motivation to increase his cultivation level by 3 levels, Gray immediately became spirited and walked towards the 22nd floor. He actually reached the 22nd floor so quickly. Julio might really be able to reach the 26th floor. Not long after the rune patterns on the 20th floor of the trial tower lit up, the 21st and 22nd floors lit up one after another. Some of the Chaos Temple's experts guarding outside the trial tower stroked their beards and nodded in satisfaction. It's a pity that he doesn't have an affinity physique. Otherwise, his potential would definitely not be inferior to the Sacred Sons. While some people were satisfied, they could not help but feel a little regretful. An affinity physique was an extremely rare and terrifying physique. As long as the cultivation aptitude of a person with this physique was not too bad, their future achievements were destined to be unattainable by ordinary disciples. Unfortunately, There are just too few people with this physique. Sometimes, one might not even encounter one in several hundred years. Chapter 683. On the 22nd floor, the rune mechanism's power had increased from the 4th level of magic light. With the time rule's acceleration, Gray easily passed the 22nd floor. On the 23rd floor, the rune mechanism's power had increased. It had reached the 5th level of magic light. Gray felt a lot of pressure, but he still used the time rule's scary speed to pass the floor. On the 24th floor, the rune mechanism's power had increased from the 5th level of magic light. Gray felt a lot more pressure. Fortunately, he still used the time rule's speed to pass the floor. Stepping onto the 25th floor, a buzzing sound covered Gray. When the buzzing sound was over, Gray's level had increased again. He had reached the later stage of the 2nd level of magic light. He was not far from the limit. This proved that his guess was correct. Because his level was low when he entered, he did not need to reach the 30th floor to increase his level by 3 levels. With anticipation, Gray walked into the 25th floor's tunnel. Caca! Suddenly, a cold air spread. A lot of white cold air appeared in the tunnel. The ground and the walls around were covered in ice. It quickly spread toward Gray. The extreme coldness was quickly spreading. Annihilation class. Feeling the scary coldness spread toward him, Gray's face changed. He quickly fell back. The cold air's power had reached Annihilation class. Its power was comparable to an Annihilation class cold air attack. Caca. With the time rule's acceleration, Gray's movement speed was very fast. The Annihilation class cold air spread very fast. Although Gray had retreated as soon as possible, he was still affected by the cold air. His body was covered in ice crystals. Fortunately, he had retreated out of the range of the cold air. He had avoided being turned into an ice statue by the cold air. The rune mechanism in the trial tower had a range of activation. When it exceeded a certain range, the rune mechanism would return to normal. Kacha! Gray clenched his fists and hit his body. He broke the ice on his body. He frowned and looked at the tunnel far away. At this time, his body was covered in a layer of silver-gray color. It was because he had used his alloy form ability to strengthen his body's defense that he was able to withstand the destructive cold blast. The alloying ability was a very special ability that Gray named as a permanent ability. The reason why Gray named it a permanent ability was because the strength of this ability had nothing to do with the level of the bloodline. It would not be eliminated as one's realm increased, and it had an amplifying effect on Gray at any realm. The increased defensive strength was only related to Gray's realm, and had nothing to do with the level of the bloodline that made up this ability. Now, Gray had reached the 2nd tier of magic light. After he used his alloy power, his defense was comparable to Annihilation class. Because of that, he was able to block the Annihilation class cold air. Even if it was just the shockwave, it was still Annihilation class. Under normal circumstances, after being hit by such a shockwave, even someone at the 5th tier of magic light would be hurt. The fact that he was not hurt meant that his defense had reached Annihilation class. With the speed given by the time rule power, I will not be able to get through. It looks like I will have to use the time rule power's time decay feature. Fine. Let me see how strong a magic light class time rule power is. The purple light covered Gray's body again. He went into the tunnel. Almost at the next moment, the runes in the tunnel were activated. The white cold air appeared again and spread toward him. Shwa! Gray drew his sword and swung it. A purple ray of light shot out at an extremely fast speed. It was like the first ray of light when the sun rose in the morning, colliding with the white cold air. Although the sword was suppressed and could not amplify his power, he still liked to fight with a sword. Blurg! The purple light collided with the white cold air. The white cold air was like a thick fog encountering sunlight, disappearing in an instant and vanishing into thin air. Under the time rule power, the Annihilation class cold air was destroyed. Obviously, the time rule power had reached Annihilation class. Before this, Gray did not have the confidence to fight an Annihilation class without using his resurrection power and corpse controlling power. Now, he had absolute confidence. He was now able to fight an Annihilation class. With the special nature of the time rule power, it was not impossible for him to win. Who? Who? After all, the rune mechanism was not broken. Although the cold air was destroyed by Gray, the cold air quickly spread again. It attacked Gray again. Blurg! Gray slashed out with his sword again. A purple light streaked across, and a newly appeared cold air once again dissipated. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Gray had already passed through the section of the passage where the runes had lit up. As Gray skimmed past, the glowing rune patterns dimmed, and the dense cold air didn't appear again. So, he kept going forward. A few more rune mechanisms were activated. There was a black flame that did not look hot, but the power was very scary. There was also a metal power that turned into a metal blade. With the power of the time rule power, Gray spent a lot of effort to get through. He went to the stone stairs that led to the 26th floor. Next to the stone stairs, there was a leopard beast that was more than 30 feet long. Its body was black iron. It was like it was made of black metal. It had a metallic feel to it. Seeing the leopard beast, Gray was on guard. The leopard beast was not big. It was only around 30 feet long. If it was a real blood beast, its battle power was like a mad-class blood beast. But it was created by the rune mechanism. Its battle power could not be measured by its size. Gray had encountered it a few times, so he knew that. Of course, after noticing Gray's arrival, the leopard beast attacked Gray. The speed it showed made Gray's face look serious. So, the leopard beast was like a flash of black light. In an instant, it was close to Gray. It stretched out its metal claws with green wind blades attached to them. The aura it emitted was enough to make Gray's hair stand on end. It slashed at Gray. Gray's long sword was wrapped in purple light. He met the metal claws with his sword. Clang! The long sword wrapped in purple light collided with the metal claws attached to the green wind blades. Under the power of the time rule power, the green wind blades attached to the metal claws were destroyed. A scratch appeared on the metal claws. On the other hand, the time rule power that Gray had wrapped around his sword was also exhausted. It's comparable to a disaster-class blood beast. Gray was pushed back by the shock from the sword. His face became more serious. Even if he used the time rule power that had reached the destructive level, the advantage he had was not obvious. This leopard beast battle power was comparable to a disaster-class blood beast. So, the leopard beast turned into a black shadow again and attacked Gray with its claws. Whoosh! The wind blades attached to the metal claws seemed to be able to cut through space. They slashed at Gray with an extremely dangerous aura. At this moment, Gray's figure, which was shrouded in purple light, moved sideways and dodged the claws. The long sword wrapped in purple light slashed at the leopard beast's side. Puff! A deep gash appeared on the leopard's side. Even its originally shiny body had dimmed slightly, although it did not collapse. Under the effect of the law of time, the leopard's body had clearly suffered a certain degree of damage. Clang! Attack from the side. The leopard beast turned around and attacked Gray with its sharp claws attached to the green wind blades. Gray, who had just attacked the leopard beast, could not dodge in time. He could only block with his sword and was immediately pushed back. The leopard beast did not give up. It quickly pounced on Gray and attacked him continuously. Clang, clang, clang. After blocking the leopard beast's crazy attacks, Gray finally found a chance to counterattack. The long sword, which was shrouded in purple light, slashed at one of the leopard beast's forelimbs. Puff! A deep scratch appeared on the leopard beast's forelimbs. The time rule power once again acted on the leopard beast's body. The leopard beast's body, which was already dim, became even dimmer. There were even traces of cracks. The leopard beast's body was not far from collapsing. So, shrouded in purple light, Gray quickly fought with the leopard beast, looking for another opportunity to attack. After fighting for a long time, even the power of blood was consumed by half. Gray found another opportunity. The long sword wrapped in purple light pierced the leopard beast's abdomen. Puff! The long sword pierced deeply into the leopard beast's abdomen. The time rule power from the place where the sword pierced the leopard beast's body. The fine cracks on the leopard beast's body quickly widened. In the end, the entire leopard beast completely shattered, turning into countless fragments of metal. Huff! The long sword hit the ground. Gray took a deep breath. This fight had not been easy. In order to destroy the leopard beast, he had used up half of his blood power. Although the time rule power used up more blood power than other powers, the main reason was that the leopard beast power was as strong as an annihilation class. It was very difficult to deal with. If I can kill a disaster class leopard beast, that means I should be able to kill a disaster class blood beast. At the same time, Gray could not help but feel happy. Aside from his ability to control corpses and revive, his combat power was as strong as an annihilation class. With the time rule power's special nature, he could even kill a disaster class blood beast. Pa! 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 Stepping on the stone stairs, Gray walked up. He finally reached the 26th floor. BZZT. A strong buzzing sound covered Gray. It lasted for a few seconds before it finally stopped. The higher he went, the stronger the buzzing sound became. Every floor gave him more power. What a shame. A trace of regret appeared on Gray's face. During the process of trembling cry, increasing his strength, he had clearly touched upon the bottleneck between the second level and the third level of Demon Light. Unfortunately, Trembling Cry's lack of strength wasn't able to help him break through this bottleneck. It looks like if I want to level up to the second level of Magic Light, I need to reach the 27th floor. Looking at the tunnel in front of him, Gray walked forward with determination. Chapter 684. Julio has reached the 26th floor. He did not disappoint us after all. After this time, we should give him more resources. Just as Gray reached the 26th floor, the markings on the 26th floor of the Trial Tower were activated. The Chaos Temple elites guarding the Trial Tower could not help but smile. Even the ruddy-faced elder could not help but nod slightly. In the past 100 years, there were no more than 10 disciples who could reach the 25th floor. Julio could reach the 26th floor. His battle record was enough to rank him in the top 3. The one in first place was the Chaos Holy Son of this generation. With his battle record of reaching the 30th floor, he was unquestionably in first place. Other than that, there was another disciple from 50 years ago. His final battle record was the same as Julio's, reaching the 26th floor. His later achievements had also proven to them that he was amazing. Now, he was an Annihilation class elite, and he was one of the stronger ones among the Annihilation classes. Now, Julio, who had also reached the 26th floor, was undoubtedly another such genius. This made them decide to give more resources to Julio in the future. Do you think Julio can reach the 27th floor? A middle-aged woman in a simple but elegant dress asked. Reaching the 27th floor? That's not very possible, right? After all, the 26th floor's Guardian Beast battle power is beyond a normal Annihilation class. A middle-aged man frowned slightly and said with some hesitation, "I'm just saying." The middle-aged woman shook her head slightly. In fact, she was also not very optimistic about Julio reaching the 27th floor. She was also very familiar with the situation in the Trial Tower. Don't ask for too much. Reaching the 26th floor is already an outstanding talent. As for reaching the 27th floor, it's too difficult. An elder also shook his head with a smile. On the 26th floor, Gray walked forward along the passage. After walking forward for about 10 meters, suddenly, pitter-patter, a blinding light suddenly appeared. Purple and red appeared at the same time. It was like a rushing flood attacking Gray. The source of the purple was thunder, and the source of the red was fire. A large amount of purple thunder mixed with the red fire, turning into purple and red plasma. It swept out like a flood. A combination of lightning and fire. Gray felt a sense of danger as the terrifying aura of destruction surged towards him. Whoosh! With a wave of his sword, a purple ray of light shot out and collided with the purple and crimson torrents rushing towards him. Crack! Under the power of the time precepts, the purple and red torrents immediately showed signs of collapse. However, the purple and red torrents were simply too powerful. Even when the purple light was completely exhausted, there were still some remnants left. And this remnant power crashed into Gray, who was behind the purple light at a terrifying speed. Whoosh! At the critical moment, Gray, who was shrouded in purple light, stomped on the ground and flew up. He was almost touching the top of the tunnel to avoid the remaining power. If it weren't for the rule of time's ability to wear down and obstruct the torrent for a moment, he might not have been able to avoid this residual power. His power is comparable to a normal annihilation class who has mastered a mixture of two elemental powers. He's about the same as Fod when he doesn't use his blood skills. Gray's expression was stern. He felt extremely troubled. The reason he was able to defeat and kill Fod was due to the combination of his corpse control ability and time precepts. Now, he couldn't even use his space item, so he couldn't use his corpse control ability. Crack! The purple and red torrents appeared again and attacked Gray. Danger once again enveloped Gray. Whoosh! The purple light that represented the time precepts went towards the terrifying torrent, while Gray quickly dodged. Peepa, peepa, peepa. One after another, the purple and red torrents attacked Gray. Gray dodged them all. However, it wasn't easy for Gray to dodge. Every dodge consumed a lot of his mental and physical strength. His forehead was already covered in sweat, but his eyes were getting brighter. Whoosh! Taking advantage of the moment when the purple and red torrents disappeared and the new purple and red torrents didn't have time to form, his figure shot into the depths of the tunnel. Crack! Before Gray could pass through, the purple and red torrents had already begun brewing. The purple and red torrents were rapidly growing. When they grew to their largest size, the entire tunnel would be blocked by the purple and red torrents. Chi! Gray's figure suddenly slid out diagonally and swept past the edge of the tunnel, leaving the purple and red torrents behind him. As he swept past this section of the tunnel, the rune lines that activated the purple and red torrents dimmed. Even the purple and red torrents that were activated dissipated and disappeared on the spot. He had passed through this rune mechanism, but it wasn't without a price. His left arm was brushed by the purple and red torrents. The sleeve on his arm turned to ashes on the spot. His silver-gray skin also had a burn. Luckily, it's just a scratch. It's not serious. Looking at the wound and seeing that it was only a light burn, Gray let out a sigh of relief. He then took a deep breath and continued forward. Now that he had reached the bottleneck of the second level of magic light, if he could pass through this tunnel and enter the 27th floor, he should be able to break through to the third level of magic light. So he had to give it a try no matter what. Gray walked forward step by step. After walking forward for more than 20 meters, the rune lines in front of him lit up again. He had activated the rune mechanism again, only to see the dense rune lines light up. In the tunnel, suddenly, a large amount of golden light gathered and turned into a huge golden vertical eye. The golden vertical eye floated strangely in the air. It looked extremely terrifying, and the terrifying aura that permeated the vertical eye showed that it wasn't as simple as it looked. Whoosh! A beam that looked like light, but was actually condensed from metal shot out from the eye. The terrifying aura of sharpness locked onto Gray. Ding! Gray hurriedly dodged. The moment he dodged, a sharp collision sound came from where he was just a moment ago. Ding, ding, ding. From the golden, I shot out beams that were condensed from metal, continuously attacking Gray. However, Gray continued to dodge. It should be a combination of the all-seeing eye ability and the metal ability. While dodging the incoming beams, Gray judged in his heart. If I want to pass, I'm afraid I have to destroy that golden eye in the air to have a chance. With a plan in mind, Gray slowly approached the golden vertical eye while dodging the golden beams. The closer he got to the golden vertical eye, the stronger the threat of the golden beams became. Pooh! A golden beam brushed past Gray, almost brushing past his abdomen, leaving a clear bloody mark on Gray's abdomen. At this moment, Gray made his move. A purple beam attacked the golden vertical eye. Gotcha! Although the golden beam was powerful, as the golden vertical eye that unleashed the golden beam, its defense was not too strong. Under the power of the rule of time, it instantly collapsed, and Gray took this opportunity to quickly pass through this passage. Continuing forward, Gray successively encountered the magma ability that was a mixture of fire and earth, and the ice wind blade ability that was a mixture of ice and wind. However, he passed through all of them without any danger. In front of him, a stone staircase appeared in Gray's field of vision. On the opposite side, a ferocious beast with a black iron body also appeared in Gray's field of vision. This was a ferocious beast that was 3 meters long and looked like a lion. Although it was only 3 meters long, the terrifying aura that it emitted made Gray's hair stand on end. It gave him a deep sense of crisis. There was no doubt that this was another war beast created by the runic array. Its combat power could not be measured by common sense. Hula. At the same time that Gray discovered the lion beast, the lion beast also discovered Gray. The lion beast's head turned to Gray, and then from its shadow, a large number of shadows spread out, turning into huge shadow tentacles one after another. And the change did not stop there. After these dark shadow tentacles appeared, the color of their surface began to change, and finally turned golden, full of a metallic texture, a mixed ability of metal and shadow. Gray had seen an introduction to this kind of mixed ability in a book, and from the process of the change just now, it was not difficult to judge that the opponent's ability was a mixed ability of metal and shadow. Shio, a metallized shadow tentacle, turned into a long javelin and stabbed at Gray. Purple light wrapped around the sword. Gray slashed out and immediately cut off the metallized shadow tentacle. Under the effect of the rule of time, the entire metallized shadow tentacle collapsed. However, more metallized shadow tentacles attacked Gray, blocking all of Gray's escape routes. Puff! Covered in purple light, Gray quickly dodged, but he still could not completely avoid it. A metallized shadow tentacle brushed past him, and a scratch appeared on his back. Drops of blood slid down his back. Feeling the burning pain on his back, Gray's expression became more dignified. Compared to the one-time attack triggered by the runic mechanism, the war beast in front of him, which was triggered by the runic mechanism and had the ability to attack continuously, was obviously stronger. Shio, shio, shio. A large number of metallized shadow tentacles attacked Gray from all directions, blocking Gray's escape routes. Covered in purple light, Gray dodged continuously under the acceleration of the rule of time. But the metallized shadow tentacles were too dense. Even with his terrifying speed, he could not avoid all the attacks. Puff, puff, puff. In just a few moments, bloody marks appeared on his body one after another. Drops of blood seeped out from these bloody marks, and red marks appeared on his clothes one after another. Chapter 685. I can't go on like this. Feeling the burning pain all over his body, Gray's expression was serious. If this continued, he might die of exhaustion. According to the information he had heard, no one had died in the trial tower. The trial tower should stop attacking when the participant was seriously injured. However, this also meant that the trial was over, and he would never be able to reach the 27th floor. If he could not reach the 27th floor, he would not be able to reach the 3rd level of magic light in a short time. Although he had reached the bottleneck of the 2nd level of demon light, if he relied on time to slowly grind away at it, then even with his 2nd metamorphosis and his strength rapidly increasing every day, it would still take him a full month or 2. 1 or 2 months was not a lot, but it was not a little either. It would be best if he could save it. Fury. With a crackling sound, Gray's body could be seen changing quickly. Whether it was horizontally or vertically, there were obvious changes. His muscles became even thicker. His muscles, which were originally well-defined but not overly prominent, quickly became like horned dragons that coiled around Gray's body, causing his body to swell up by full size. His height increased rapidly. His original height of 1.8 meters quickly reached 2 meters, and it was still growing. It finally stopped when he reached 2.5 meters. The clothes on his body were stretched taut by his bulging body. Finally, they were torn and turned into strips of cloth that wrapped around his body. He was not using the level 1 Fury, but the level 2 Fury that Gray had achieved not long ago. The level 1 Fury had an amplification effect on those who were King tier and below. The level 2 Fury had an amplification effect on those who were Magic Light and below. Now that Gray had reached the magic light level, he could only use the level 2 Fury to amplify his speed. However, because the power of the Law of Time had surpassed the magic light level and reached the destruction level, even the level 2 Fury could not amplify the power of the Law of Time. Fortunately, Gray's speed could reach the destruction level because of the external flow of time. Gray's own speed was still at the magic light level and could still be amplified by the Fury. Although it was only his speed that was increased, it was enough for the current Gray. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A large number of metallized shadow tentacles came from all directions and attacked Gray like javelins with terrifying power that seemed to be able to pierce through space. Whoosh. Taking a deep breath, Gray, who was 5 meters tall, began to move quickly. Fast, extremely fast. His speed, which was already extremely fast, suddenly exploded. He reached a speed that surpassed normal annihilation class. Whoosh! A metallized shadow tentacle went straight for Gray's chest. Gray leaned to the side, dodging the tentacle. Then, with a slash of his long sword, he cut off the tentacle. Under the power of the laws of time, the entire metallized shadow tentacle decayed and disappeared. Then, he took a step forward to the left. The moment he took that step, 3 metallized shadow tentacles passed through his original position and collided with each other. Clang! The scary collision created a shockwave that spread everywhere. It made the air vibrate. Even a king-class warrior would have been turned into a pile of minced meat. Gray was already far away from where he had been. After his alloy form, his defense had reached annihilation class. He was not afraid of the shockwave. Using his increased speed, he kept dodging the attacks of the metallized shadow tentacles. He approached the lion beast. Blurg! The long sword, which was surrounded by purple light, slashed across the lion beast's neck. It went deep into the lion beast's neck. The time rule power was applied to the lion beast's body. It made the lion beast's metal surface dim. If it had been a blood beast, it would not have been able to withstand the time rule power. With such an injury, it would have been near death. But the lion beast was just a rune. It was not a real blood beast. Therefore, there was no such thing as its neck being damaged. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A large number of metallized shadow tentacles went for Gray, who was next to the lion beast. Whoosh. Gray's body flashed and disappeared from where he had been. A large number of metallized shadow tentacles collided where he had been. He circled around and went to the other side of the lion beast. Puff! The long sword, which was surrounded by purple light, slashed down again. It was also aimed at the lion beast's neck. However, the direction was from the other side. Clatter! A metal head fell to the ground with a crisp sound. The metallized shadow tentacles that were chasing after Gray suddenly collapsed and disappeared. Although the neck was not the lion beast's vital point, it did not mean that the lion beast could still move after its neck was cut off. It was like controlling a corpse. Strictly speaking, the neck was not a vital point. However, if the neck was cut off, the corpse would also lose its ability to move. Clatter! After confirming that the lion beast had lost its ability to move, Gray quickly deactivated his fury state. A wave of fatigue came over him. He quickly leaned his long sword on the ground. It took him a while to recover. Using blood skills would not only deplete one's blood power, but also one's physical strength. This was why one would feel tired after using blood skills. This time, I should be able to break through to the 3rd level of magic light. Dragging his tired body, Gray's eyes were filled with anticipation. He stepped on the stone stairs and walked toward the 27th level. Buzz! When he stepped onto the 27th level, a strange trembling enveloped Gray. It lasted for a few seconds before finally stopping. The trembling had stopped, but the changes in Gray's body did not stop. With the help of the trembling, Gray broke through the bottleneck from the 2nd level of magic light to the 3rd level of magic light. His body began to change rapidly. Muscles, bones, hair, blood power. Everything was rapidly strengthening and transforming. Every increase in realm was a transformation of the body. It was a sublimation of the body. The reason why rule-level experts could live for tens of thousands of years was that the accumulation of transformation after transformation finally allowed their bodies to undergo a high-level evolution. Although they still maintained the appearance of a human, to a certain extent, they were fundamentally different from ordinary people. Over 10 minutes later, this transformation ended, and Gray's body stabilized. He felt that his body was now filled with power. He could smash a mountain and cut off a huge river with a raise of his hand. This was not a metaphor, but a fact. After reaching the third level of magic light, even the power of his physical body was comparable to the second level of magic light. This kind of battle strength could easily destroy mountains and cut off rivers. I wonder how powerful the runic mechanisms on the 27th level will be. Looking at the passage to the 27th level, Gray immediately walked in. After reaching the 27th floor, his boundary had risen to the third level of demon light, and he had already achieved his goal. But if he could go to a higher floor, he naturally wouldn't give up. After all, the higher he went, the more benefits he would obtain. These benefits did not only include an increase in realm, but also some unknown rewards. Swish! A white light flashed, and a disciple of the Chaos Temple who had failed was sent out of the trial tower. Outside the trial tower, there were already quite a few people who had been sent out of the trial tower due to their failures. Some people were delighted, satisfied with their results, while others were pounding their chests and stamping their feet in regret, dissatisfied with their results. Most of them had only reached the 10th level, and there were very few who had reached the 20th level. Evidently, the 20th level was a watershed that had stopped too many people. Among the children of the top families, the other 4 had already been sent out of the trial tower. Aside from the dejected look on the weakest one's face, the other 3 all had expressions of joy on their faces. It was clear that they had gained quite a bit. Even compared to the disciples of the Chaos Temple, the 3 of them were close to the upper echelons. Reaching the 20th level was definitely not a problem. And with the characteristics of the trial tower, reaching the 20th level and above meant that their realms had most likely risen by 2 levels. Some people were still in the trial tower, and the trial had not yet ended. The people who had been sent out were like the 10 or so disciples of the Chaos Temple, paying attention to the trial tower. The 27th level has lit up. Suddenly, a disciple of the Chaos Temple cried out in surprise, his face filled with disbelief. As a disciple of the Chaos Temple, he naturally understood what the 27th level represented, so he immediately cried out in surprise. Hearing his cry, quite a few people looked at the trial tower and immediately discovered that the rune patterns on the 27th level had lit up. Someone actually reached the 27th level. It's Senior Brother Julio. It must be Senior Brother Julio who has reached the 27th level. Senior Brother Julio has actually reached the 27th level. Doesn't that mean his potential is second only to the chosen? For a moment, cries of surprise, exclamations, and exclamations filled the air. Whether it was the experts of the Chaos Temple, the disciples of the Chaos Temple, or the disciples of the top clans, all of them naturally believed that the one who had reached the 27th level was Julio and not someone else. It's really as you said. He really did reach the 27th level. A middle-aged man among the experts of the Chaos Temple looked at the middle-aged woman and sighed. I was just saying it casually. I never thought he'd really be able to reach this step. The middle-aged woman also sighed emotionally. Although she had said it like that, she also did not hold much hope for Julio reaching the 27th level. She never thought that he would really reach the 27th level, which truly shocked her. Good. First, there was the chosen son of Chaos who reached the 30th level. And now, there's Julio who reached the 27th level. It's destined that my Chaos Temple will continue to prosper. The ruddy-faced old man laughed heartily. His voice was filled with carefreeness. He was clearly extremely happy. If an organization wanted to continue prospering, they needed an endless stream of new blood. Otherwise, once the older generation died of old age, the younger generation would not be able to take over, and the organization would definitely decline. First, there was the chosen son of Chaos who reached the 30th level, and then there was Julio who reached the 27th level. It clearly indicated that the Chaos Temple would continue to prosper. Chapter 686. I failed. A white light flashed. Gray realized he was no longer in the tunnel. He had appeared in a palace. Earlier, he had failed near the last stone staircase on the 27th floor. He had not been able to defeat the last guardian beast to enter the 28th floor. After entering the 27th floor, the power of the rune mechanism was even scarier. Although the rune mechanism he encountered was a mix of two elements, the power was much stronger than when Fod used two elements. They were not on the same level. If Gray had guessed correctly, the power of the rune mechanism was like the second level of Annihilation class, which had a mix of two elements. Faced with such a scary power, time rules could not block it. Even with Blood Madness, which increased his speed, it was difficult to break through the rune mechanism. Fortunately, his level had reached the third level of Magic Light. Gray's speed had increased again. With the increased speed and Blood Madness, he was able to get through the rune mechanism at the cost of a few injuries. He reached the staircase that led to the 28th floor. Here, he encountered a silver-colored bird beast. The bird beast's wingspan was around 12 feet. Among the bird beasts Gray had seen, its size was average. The bird beast's battle power was the strongest Gray had ever seen. It had a mix of fire and earth elements. Its level was like the second level of Annihilation class. Faced with such a scary bird beast, Gray did not dare take it head-on. He used his speed to dodge and find a chance to climb the stone staircase. It was a shame that the bird beast's power was too strong. No matter if it was the power of the blood beast or the speed of its body, it was extremely scary. In the end, Gray was unable to climb the stone staircase. He was surrounded by red lava. He was in danger. Faced with a second-level Annihilation class attack, even the alloy defense could not block it. Gray was about to be melted by the lava. At this moment, a white light flashed. He was wrapped up and appeared in the palace. The entire palace was built with gold and jade. It was gold and jade. It was very solemn. It had a holy presence. On both sides of the palace were huge stone pillars, each of which was more than 10 meters thick. They were like pillars that supported the heavens and the earth, as if the palace was a world of its own. On top of the stone pillars, there was a huge picture. There was the corpse of a huge beast lying on the ground, a group of people prostrating themselves in worship, and a tower that was being built. This should be a space within the trial tower. After failing the trial, one would be sent here. Buzz. A trembling sound suddenly enveloped Gray before quickly disappearing. This time, however, after the trembling sound disappeared, it did not increase Gray's strength. Instead, Gray's mind gained many new things. The Berserk Law imprint has changed. Suddenly, Gray's expression changed, and he quickly checked the Berserk Law imprint in his mind. The Law imprint was the manifestation of a rule-level elite's understanding of the rules. If one comprehended it, they would be able to master the corresponding rule ability to a certain extent. Of course, this kind of mastery naturally had many limitations. It was definitely not comparable to a rule ability. To a certain extent, the Law imprint was equivalent to a runic matrix. Like a runic matrix, it could manifest all kinds of abilities. The only difference was that a runic matrix needed to be engraved on a specific runic material and needed magic crystals to provide magic power. The Law imprint, on the other hand, was engraved in a person's mind and was driven by blood power. Before this, Gray's mind was imprinted with the Berserk Law imprint. If the Berserk Law imprint changed and was replaced with another Law imprint, he naturally would not be able to use the Berserk Blood skill. In other words, the comprehension he had done over the past few years would be completely useless. Therefore, when he discovered that the Berserk Law imprint had changed, he was shocked. A few years of hard work had been destroyed in a day. Anyone would be shocked. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. After checking the Berserk Law imprint and the information that was imprinted in his mind, Gray let out a long sigh of relief. The Berserk Law imprint had indeed changed, but did not develop in a bad direction. The original Berserk Law imprint had been replaced by a more profound Berserk Law imprint. Not only could he still use the Berserk Blood skill, but his cultivation level had also increased by 2 levels. The original Berserk Law imprint could only be comprehended up to the 3rd level. However, The current Berserk Law imprint could be comprehended up to the 5th level. It was obviously a good thing for him to obtain the cultivation method of the Berserk Blood skill without affecting the use of the Berserk Blood skill. Whoosh! There was a flash of light. In the palace, not far from Gray, a person who looked as miserable as Gray appeared. Her originally beautiful red hair had been charred black. The clothes on her body were tattered and also covered with charred marks. Her appearance was even more miserable than Gray's. However, there was an unconcealable joy on her face. That person was Julio. The reason he was so happy was because he had reached the 26th floor. Although he had not been on the 26th floor for long before he was defeated by the rune mechanism and teleported there, he had still reached the 26th floor. That was enough to make him proud. In the past 100 years of the Chaos Holy Palace, only Chaos Holy Sun had reached the 26th floor. The only person who had reached the 26th floor was a brother 50 years ago. He was able to reach the 26th floor. That meant his potential was not any worse than that big brother. That big brother was very strong in Annihilation class. If nothing unexpected happened, he would grow to the same level as that big brother in 50 years. One could imagine how excited and proud he was. After checking what he had obtained in his mind, the joy on his face grew. Then, he disappeared in a burst of white light, along with Gray. When they reappeared, both he and Gray were outside the trial tower. Their first reaction was to take out their clothes to cover their bodies. In the trial tower, all magic items were restricted. It made their clothes look terrible. The two of them had just put on their clothes when a group of people rushed over. Gray was pushed aside by the people who rushed over. Julio was surrounded by people who rushed over. Brother Julio, you are so strong. A well-behaved young girl from the Chaos Temple had a look of worship in her eyes. Brother Julio's result is the second best in the Chaos Holy Palace in the past 100 years. Let's see who dares to say that our trial students are not as good as the previous batches. A Chaos Holy Palace student was very proud of himself. Yeah, now those people can finally shut their mouths. Another Chaos Holy Palace student was very proud of himself. And those people who said that Brother Julio doesn't deserve to be treated as a core disciple can also shut up. A Chaos Holy Palace student sneered. If reaching the 27th floor didn't deserve to be treated as a core disciple, then those who didn't even reach the 26th floor were even more unworthy. Suddenly, the crowd surrounding Julio automatically separated. More than 10 Chaos Holy Palace experts walked over. Well done. The middle-aged woman had a smile on her face. Her eyes were full of satisfaction. In the past 100 years, besides the Holy Sun, you are the second person to reach the 27th floor. Being praised by a powerhouse like the middle-aged woman, even Julio, who tried his best to keep a straight face, couldn't help but show some excitement. However, the middle-aged woman's next words stunned him. After hesitating for a moment, he asked suspiciously, Elder Valida, is there a mistake? I remember that the last floor I reached was the 26th floor. Child, you're too focused. You even got the wrong floor. Hearing Julio's doubts, the middle-aged woman showed a kind smile. After so many years of participating in the trial tower, there were many who got the wrong floor like him. Although there was a hint of rebuke in her voice, she clearly didn't blame him. Fortunately, when the corresponding floor is activated, it can be seen from outside the trial tower. Otherwise, I'm afraid you might even be wrong about the floor you entered. Could it be that I really got it wrong? Seeing that the middle-aged woman was very sure that it was the 27th floor, Julio couldn't help but wonder if he really got the wrong floor. As for the possibility that someone else reached the 27th floor, it wasn't in his consideration at all. No one could surpass him to reach the 27th floor. If he couldn't do it, how could others do it? There's no need to doubt it. It's indeed the 27th floor. The ruddy-faced elder also smiled. The other Chaos Holy Palace experts also showed kind smiles. They didn't think that it was someone else who entered the 27th floor and not Julio. Yes, I understand, Elder Oleg. The ruddy-faced elder's words made his doubt turn into approval. Since Elder Bartlett said so, there was naturally no mistake. He must have been muddle-headed and got the wrong floor. How many floors did I go up? And it could be seen from outside. Hearing their conversation, Gray's heart shivered. He couldn't help but feel a trace of lingering fear. The Leopold clan was at the bottom of the first-rate clans. Every time they competed for a spot, it was just a formality. None of their descendants had ever entered the trial tower. Naturally, they didn't know about the trial tower. They didn't ask the other first-rate clans whose descendants had entered the trial tower. The reason was naturally because of heartache. So he didn't know how many floors he had activated to be visible from outside. Fortunately, he couldn't use spatial items in the trial tower, so he couldn't take out blood beast blood. He didn't transform in the trial tower, so his ability of time law didn't increase with his cultivation. In the end, he only reached the 27th floor, and the red-haired young man's final floor was close to his, reaching the 26th floor. There was only a difference of 1 floor. After being misled by the Chaos Holy Palace experts, even he himself believed it. If the difference was too great, it would be difficult to mislead him. At that time, he might be found out. Although he didn't judge the Chaos Holy Palace with malice, he wasn't naive enough to think that they wouldn't do anything to him. Chapter 687. As Gray and Julio finished the trial, the entire trial had come to an end. It was already afternoon. Under the guidance or surveillance of the people of the Chaos Temple, Gray's group of 5 left the Chaos Temple. Sir Gray, please spare some time tomorrow morning. I will pay you a visit then. At the entrance of the Chaos Temple, Blanca solemnly said to Gray. Okay. Gray agreed. Although he did not know why the other party was looking for him, since it was not looking for trouble, he would naturally treat them with courtesy. Someone beat us to it. George Lopez and Landry Gomo's eyes swept between Gray and Blanca. Their brows furrowed slightly, but they soon relaxed. In the process of competing for the trial tower slot, they could naturally see the potential that Gray had displayed and wanted to befriend him. But now, it seemed that Brancamanti had beaten them to it. Back at the hotel, the injured and exhausted Gray did not use the blood of the disaster-grade blood beast to transform. Instead, he went back to his room to rest after dinner. He did not wake up until the next day when the sun had completely risen. After a good night's sleep, coupled with the high-grade healing potion that he had consumed earlier, Gray's spirit had recovered, although his injuries had not completely healed. He washed up, cultivated, and then went downstairs to the restaurant with Fod and Kinshaw to eat. How much do you know about Brancamanti? Gray looked at Fod and asked. Not much. I only know that she is the most outstanding member of the younger generation of the Manti family and has a mind for business. What's wrong? Fod looked at Gray in puzzlement, not understanding the reason for Gray's question. Yesterday, Brancamanti said that she would pay a visit this morning. I can't guess the purpose of her visit. Gray said as he put down the table knife. Could it be that she has taken a fancy to Lord Gray's potential and is here to rope in allies? Kinshaw guessed. I don't think so. Gray shook his head. It was possible that the other party had come because of his potential, but his intuition told him that the other party's visit this time was not because of his potential, at least not completely. Not long after Gray and the others finished their meal and returned to their rooms, an exquisite carriage stopped in front of the inn. 3 people walked out of the carriage. One was a very beautiful young woman, the other was a middle-aged man, and the other was a middle-aged woman. They were Blanca Mandy, level 6 alchemist Roman Dodge, and Ellen Mandy, the middle-aged woman Gray had met in the Radiant Light Library. Soon, the 3 of them sat in the living room of Gray's suite. Seeing the 3 of them, especially the middle-aged woman, Ellen Mandy, whom he had met once before, Gray was more certain that Blanca Mandy was here for something else. Let me introduce you. This is my aunt, Ellen Mandy. I'm sure you still remember her. This is my uncle, Roman Dodge. He's a level 6 alchemist. Blanca Manti introduced to Gray. Greetings, Master Roman. Gray was startled. He stood up and bowed slightly again. He looked at the middle-aged man with a look of awe and respect. With Aubrey, a Grandmaster alchemist, by his side, he naturally had some understanding of famous alchemists. Amongst them, he knew the most about Grandmaster Roman. After all, he was the only Grandmaster alchemist of the 6th rank in the Anarchic lands. A level 6 alchemy master was an alchemy master who could refine level 6 mana potions. Level 6 mana potions were mana potions that were useful to low-rank powerhouses. In other words, even low-rank powerhouses would need his help sometimes. If low-rank powerhouses were at the peak of blood warriors and had the highest achievements in blood cultivation, then a level 6 alchemist was at the peak of alchemists and had the highest achievements in alchemy. One could imagine his identity and status. I heard from my wife that you have a very strong photographic memory. Can you let me see it? Roman Dodge looked at Gray and sized him up. He trusted his wife's words, but he was still a little worried that her judgment was wrong. Sure. How do you want to test me, Master Roman? Gray, who had already guessed the other party's intentions, nodded in agreement. All right, please memorize the contents of this book. Roman Dodge took out a thick leather book from his spatial bracelet and handed it to Gray. Gray reached out to take it. On the cover were the words records of magic herbs. He flipped through the pages and found that they were introductions to magic herbs one after another. Not only did it introduce the medicinal properties of magic herbs, but it also had detailed descriptions of the corresponding growth environment. He glanced at the page and immediately memorized the contents. He flipped the page, and 2 pages appeared before him. He quickly scanned them, and the contents of the 2 pages were completely memorized. He flipped through the pages and quickly memorized the contents of each page. His movements were smooth and fast, as if he was flipping through a book quickly instead of memorizing it. Soon, he finished flipping through the thick leather book. Gray handed the book back to Roman Dodge. I've memorized it. You may ask, Master Roman. All right, tell me about the introduction of the nether-devouring wood. Roman Dodge nodded and asked. The nether-devouring wood is an arboreal plant that can generally grow to more than 20 meters. Its bark is grayish-brown with vertical cracks, and its flowers are black. It can be used as a magic herb and has the effect of repairing soul injuries. All kinds of introductions about magic plants flashed through Gray's mind. Gray quickly found the introduction of the nether-devouring wood and recited it. Everything is correct. There's not a single mistake. Your eidetic memory is better than I imagined. Looking at Gray, Roman Dodge's eyes were filled with eagerness and even a bit of passion. Because he was worried that his wife's judgment was wrong, he tested Gray. The results of the test were indeed as he had feared. His wife's judgment was wrong, but it was not in a bad direction, but in a good direction. The other party's eidetic memory was not only slightly better than his. Compared to him, it was a full level higher. This made him excited. If the other party followed him to learn alchemy, his future achievements might surpass him and become the level 7 alchemy master that even he yearned for. In fact, his wife was not wrong. The reason why Gray's eidetic memory ability became stronger was because of the advancement of his realm. Roman Dodge stared at Gray with a burning gaze and was slightly excited. I'm sure you already know why I'm here, so I won't beat around the bush. Are you interested in learning alchemy from me? Hearing Roman Dodge's question, Gray thought for a moment before looking at Roman Dodge and said, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint Master Roman. I do have some interest in becoming an alchemist, but I won't spend my main energy in the field of alchemy. My main energy is still on cultivation. Mainly on cultivation? How can that be? Hearing Gray's answer, Roman Dodge suddenly became anxious. To become an alchemist, focus was indispensable. After all, alchemists needed to spend a lot of time on the refinement of magic potions and research of medicinal properties in addition to having a strong memory and comprehension ability. This required 10 years of focus. In order to research the medicinal properties of a few magic herbs, it was common to spend several years. Gray could not spend his main energy on alchemy. Even if he relied on his powerful alchemy talent to become an alchemy master, his achievements would be limited. And this was obviously not what he wanted. He wanted to cultivate a person whose achievements were comparable to or even surpass him. Do you know that with your talent, if you focus on alchemy, you might become a level 7 alchemy master that is rarely seen in the history of the entire Origin world? His voice was filled with anxiety. I don't know about this, but even if I know now, my decision will not change. Gray shook his head, but he was very determined. With his super memory ability, if he focused on learning alchemy, he could indeed become a level 7 alchemy master that was rarely seen in the history of the Origin world. But so what? Could he be compared to someone who had the power to destroy the world and had a lifespan of tens of thousands of years? With the ability to transform, the possibility of him becoming a level 7 expert could be said to be extremely high. Under such circumstances, how could he give up on cultivation and focus on becoming an alchemist? Foolish, you're too foolish. You're wasting your talent like this. Seeing that he had pointed out Gray's future potential, but Gray was still unmoved, Roman Dodge was flustered and exasperated. If the other party were his own child, he would have slapped him a few times. He took a deep breath and looked at Fod expectantly. Sir, he's young and impetuous. He doesn't know how to make the right choice. As his elder, won't you advise him? Sorry, I'll have to disappoint Master Roman. I respect his decision. Fod shook his head, ignoring the fact that he was not Gray's elder, but his subordinate. Even if he was Gray's elder, he would not advise him. Knowing that Gray had the ability to transform, he naturally understood Gray's potential in cultivation. He would not advise Gray to give up cultivation and focus on becoming an alchemist. Roman Dodge was so angry that his face turned ugly. It was the same for the young one and the old one. He was so angry that he wanted to jump up and stomp his feet. Uncle, Gray's talent in cultivation is extremely high. He's one of the top clans entering the trial tower this time. It's not hard to understand why he would focus on cultivation. Seeing that her uncle was so angry, Blanca Mandy hurriedly tried to persuade him. Gray's decision had actually surprised her as well. She had originally thought that with the opportunity to become a top alchemist, the other party would definitely resolutely switch to being an alchemist and become her uncle's disciple. She did not expect that the other party would so straightforwardly reject. Sigh, Roman Dodge sighed several times. He was so angry that he was almost speechless. Chapter 688. In the end, Roman Dodge left in disappointment. He wanted to take in a disciple who could devote himself to the field of alchemy, but Gray would never do that. Therefore, he was destined to return disappointed. Before he left a message that if Gray changed his mind, he could look for him at any time. Gray agreed, but it was destined that he would never look for Roman Dodge. He could not give up on cultivation and focus on the field of alchemy. As for alchemy, he was really interested in learning it under the condition that it would not affect his cultivation. He would treat it as a hobby to cultivate. He decided that when he returned, he would ask Aubrey to teach him alchemy. Although Aubrey's level was not as good as Master Roman's, he was still a level 4 alchemist. He was more than capable of teaching an amateur like him. I'm sorry. My uncle put forward a request that put you in a difficult position. Blanca Mandy did not leave with Gray. She had an apologetic look on her face. It's okay. I've disappointed Master Roman, but I really don't plan to focus on alchemy. Gray smiled bitterly and shook his head. Of course he's disappointed, but I'm sure he can understand. After all, everyone has their own goals. Blanca Mandy said with a smile. Although Gray had rejected the opportunity to reach the heavens in a single bound in her opinion, she did not look down on Gray because of this. From the very beginning, she had taken a fancy to Gray's cultivation talent, and this point had not changed in the past or now. Moreover, Gray's refusal to focus on the field of alchemy instead made her admire him a little. To be able to resist the temptation of reaching the heavens in a single bound and resolutely choose the more difficult path of cultivation, the other party was clearly a very opinionated person, and this kind of person was more likely to succeed. After staying in the hotel for a while, Blanca Mandy said goodbye and left. Gray walked her to the entrance of the hotel and then returned to the hotel. He could not wait to consume the blood of the disaster-level blood fiend and transform. The bloodline that formed the law of time needed to be improved. Most importantly, he needed to gather the 5 abilities that form the law of space and merge them into the law of space. Don't let anyone disturb me. After instructing Kensha, Gray shut himself in the training room and took out the blood he was going to consume this time from his purple ring. They were the blood of ice and fire class blood fiends, the blood of wood poison class blood fiends, the blood of wind and earth class blood fiends, the blood of water and thunder class blood fiends, and the blood of gold shadow class blood fiends. There were a total of 5 types of disaster level blood fiends, and all of them had mixed abilities. Under normal circumstances, swallowing so much blood at once was no different from committing suicide. However, now that his cultivation level had increased greatly and he had crossed 3 whole levels, it was enough for him to endure so many transformations. Gray picked up the leftmost bottle of Ice Fire Grade Blood Beast Blood, unscrewed the cork, and drank it in one gulp. Immediately, a strange change appeared on his body. First, there was a burst of extreme cold that made him shiver uncontrollably, and goosebumps appeared all over his body. Then, there was a burst of scorching heat, and his body felt like it was on fire. It was so hot that he wanted to take off all his clothes. After more than half an hour, the alternating cold and heat disappeared, and his body returned to normal. Feeling that his body wasn't too tired, Gray picked up the blood of what poison-class blood fiends, unscrewed the cork, and drank it again. 2 days later, the extremely tired Gray was lying in the bathtub, enjoying the massage from Kinch's soft and slender fingers. Originally, he was going to consume 5 types of blood fiends at once, but the accumulation of fatigue was beyond his imagination, and he could only give up in the end. On the first day, he consumed 3 types of mixed disaster-level blood fiends, and on the second day, he consumed 2 types of mixed disaster-level blood fiends. It took him 2 whole days to finally consume 5 types of disaster-level blood fiends and transform. After consuming 5 types of disaster-level blood fiends, he could clearly feel that his ability had changed. Although the change in his bloodline was very vague, he could still feel some changes. In terms of the power of the law of time, it was clearly more powerful. If he were in the Tower of Trials, with the power of the law of time, it wouldn't be difficult for him to enter the 28th level, or even the 29th level. And in terms of the power of the law of space, he had successfully obtained the power of the law of space. Although he still didn't know what kind of abilities the power of the law of space had derived from it, he was sure that he had obtained the power of the law of space. This was what he sensed from his bloodline. After resting for more than an hour, Gray left Chaos City with Fod and Kinshaw in a horse-drawn carriage. After traveling for hundreds of kilometers, they stopped at a barren land with sparse vegetation. He desperately wanted to know what kind of abilities the power of the law of space had derived from it, but it was very difficult to sense just from his bloodline. He had to try to use the power of the law of space to find out what kind of abilities the power of the law of space had derived from it. He didn't know how big of a commotion testing the power of the law of space would cause, so he left Chaos City and came to a place hundreds of kilometers away from it. He believed that at such a distance, even if he caused a huge commotion, the Chaos Holy Palace wouldn't be able to detect it. Let's see if the shadow space has been derived from it. After taking a deep breath and calming himself down, Gray began to try out the abilities recorded in the Book of Spatial Rules. The first one he was going to try was the shadow space. By now, Gray was almost certain that the ghost merchant's ability to turn the whole city into a shadow was the shadow space ability. The shadow space ability was a very powerful ability. It could trap the enemy in a shadow space without a physical body, and the user could also switch between reality and illusion. Only the user could attack the enemy, but the enemy couldn't attack the user. Such an ability was so powerful that it was almost unsolvable. Of course, there couldn't be an unsolvable ability. It seemed to be unsolvable, but in fact, it was just that no one had found a way to break it. The shadow space ability must have a way to break it, but it was undeniable that this ability was extremely powerful. So after obtaining the power of the law of space, Gray first thought of the shadow space ability. With anticipation in his eyes, Gray tried to use the power of space to create a shadow space. Hum! An invisible sound of space vibrating appeared and spread into the distance. That was Gray using the power of space. However, after a long while, other than the slight trembling at the beginning, there were no other changes. It seems that I can't derive the shadow space ability. Gray shook his head slightly. It was obvious that the power of the law of space he obtained couldn't derive the shadow space ability. Otherwise, it would be impossible for there to be no reaction at all. Even if it didn't succeed, some shadows would inevitably appear. Although the shadow space ability was one of the abilities derived from the power of the law of space, it didn't mean that everyone who mastered the power of the law of space could derive the shadow space ability. Unfortunately, he couldn't derive the shadow space ability. Let's see if I can derive the teleportation ability. Gray was somewhat disappointed that he couldn't derive a powerful shadow space ability. He tried the teleportation ability instead. This was a very practical ability that was not as powerful as the shadow space ability. To a certain extent, the space transmission ability of the purple ring should be classified as a teleportation ability. But compared to the real teleportation, the space transmission has more restrictions that must be left in advance with the space transmission coordinates. The teleportation coordinates had to be left in advance before the teleportation could be carried out. This would increase the risk of being exposed. If the enemy discovered the teleportation coordinates, they could even use the teleportation coordinates to ambush. The real teleportation didn't need to leave the teleportation coordinates at all. As long as the teleportation didn't exceed the maximum teleportation range, it could be reached in an instant. Even the limited teleportation ability of the purple ring was a great help to Gray. He had used the teleportation ability of the purple ring to escape danger many times. If it wasn't for the purple ring, he could have died many times. He had also used the teleportation ability many times to shorten the journey that would have taken days to a few seconds. For example, on this trip to Chaos City, it took him more than half a month to arrive at Chaos City on the runic ship. However, if he had left the teleportation coordinates along the way, it wouldn't have taken more than half a month. At most, it would have taken him a few minutes to arrive. The practicality of the teleportation ability was self-evident. It was definitely the best way to escape. However, the purple ring was only a magic weapon, after all. It had its own limits. For the current Gray, the activation time of the teleportation was too long. The opponents he encountered now were already at the destruction level. They were extremely fast, so he might not have the chance to activate the teleportation ability. Furthermore, leaving the teleportation coordinates was also a hidden danger. It was fine if it wasn't discovered, but if it was discovered, the enemy could use it to set a trap. Hence, even though he already had the purple ring, he still wanted to obtain the real teleportation ability and have a more powerful teleportation ability. Looking at a barren hillside in the distance, Gray tried to use the teleportation ability. Whoosh! In the next instant, Gray's figure disappeared on the spot. On the barren hillside in the distance, Gray's figure suddenly appeared. One of the derivative abilities is teleportation. Looking at the completely different scenery in front of him, a smile finally appeared on Gray's face. A moment ago, he was still far away, and the next moment, he was already standing on the hillside. Without a doubt, one of the derivative abilities of the spatial ability that he had was the teleportation ability. What made him even happier was that the entire teleportation process was completed in an instant. It was almost completed with a thought. It was much, much faster than the teleportation process of the purple ring. With such a speed of teleportation, even if he faced an enemy that he couldn't defeat, he had the ability to escape. Chapter 689. Space Storm Space Free Space Perception. After using the teleportation ability, Gray tried to use a variety of derivative abilities recorded in the Book of Space Rules, but none of them succeeded. He subconsciously used the space ability again to try another ability recorded in the Book of Space Rules. Crack! Suddenly, there was a crisp sound of something breaking. Then, a strange scene appeared beside Gray. In the void where there was nothing, a strange crack appeared. The crack was only about 1 meter long. It was curved and long, and it was pitch black inside. No light could be seen. It was like a black hole that devoured light. Crack! Since the crack appeared, Gray felt his blood force was rapidly draining away. As the blood force was draining away, the crack was also rapidly growing. From the original 1 meter, it quickly grew to several meters, and then from several meters to more than 10 meters. As the crack expanded, Gray began to be able to perceive the situation inside. In his perception, there was a long and narrow space inside. At this time, this long and narrow space was growing bigger as the crack grew longer. The blood force is almost exhausted. In just a short while, more than half of the blood force had been consumed, and this space had only been opened up to a length of 20 meters, a width of 10 meters, and a height of a few meters. Gray hurriedly stopped the supply of blood force. He still needed the blood force to test the other derivative abilities of the spatial ability, so he couldn't waste it all here. As Gray stopped the supply of blood force, the expansion of the space stopped. The crack that appeared in the air disappeared in an instant, as if it had never appeared. However, Gray was very sure that the other party had appeared. Even now, he could still feel that the space that had just opened up did not disappear when he stopped the supply of blood force. Permanent space? Gray's heart skipped a beat. He took off the magic sword hanging at his waist. The next moment, the magic sword in his hand disappeared and another magic sword appeared in the space. Then, the magic sword in the space disappeared and the magic sword appeared in his hand again. It seems that the second ability derived from the space ability should be the ability to open up space. The ability that Gray tried to use just now was the ability to open up space. The situation was already very clear. The second ability derived from the spatial ability was the ability to open up space. Judging from the rapid consumption of the power of blood, the rapid expansion of the space, and the cessation of the power of blood, the space that was opened up was a space that could grow. As long as the power of blood was consumed daily, the space would grow larger and larger. He finally understood why some rule-level powerhouses could open up a plane with the ability to open up space. If he was given enough time, he believed that he could open up a space as large as this plane. Of course, he couldn't guarantee that this plane would be able to support life like a real plane. Let's not talk about whether or not it can grow into a plane for now. Having a space to grow can solve a problem I'm currently facing. The purple ring space was extremely large. It could reach tens of thousands of cubic meters. Even so, when facing the bramble calamity crocodile that was over 40 meters long, it was already somewhat insufficient. If the bramble calamity crocodile's body was a little bigger, it definitely wouldn't be able to hold it. Moreover, now that he had reached the magic light level, the number of corpses he could control could increase again. In addition to the bramble calamity crocodile, he could also control other disaster-level blood fiends at the same time. He urgently needed a larger space to hold the corpses. The ability to open up space, derived from the space ability, just happened to solve this problem. Although the current space couldn't even hold the bramble calamity crocodile, he believed that it would only take a few days to easily accommodate it. The abilities derived from the space ability aren't limited to just teleportation and opening up space. I wonder what other abilities there are. Gray continued to search. Soon, he discovered the third ability derived from the space ability. A formless spatial tremor appeared and then quickly disappeared. Gray's surroundings did not change, but Gray knew that the ability was successfully used. At this moment, in his perception, a completely transparent barrier was erected in front of him, protecting him. This was a huge barrier that was more than 10 meters in length and width. It was completely invisible and could be easily seen from one side to the other. His vision was not affected at all, but it was real. Clang, clang, clang. Gray stretched out his hand and knocked on it. Immediately, a crisp sound was heard, as if he had knocked on something extremely hard. A hard texture came from his hand. Although he had not attacked yet, he was certain that the defense of this transparent barrier was extremely strong. This is the third ability derived from the space ability, the space barrier. Sizing up this transparent barrier that only he could sense, Fod and Kesha could not see, Gray was amazed. The space barrier was a defensive barrier derived from the space ability. Rather than calling it a defensive barrier, it was better to call it a space barrier that could defend against all attacks. It had an extremely terrifying defense and was known as the ultimate defense of the space ability. According to the introduction of the space rulebook, so far, no matter whether it was visible attacks, elemental attacks, physical attacks, or invisible attacks, soul attacks, or ghost attacks, none of them could penetrate the space barrier and injure the user of the space barrier, unless the space barrier was broken through with absolute destructive power. But how could a barrier that was given the title of space be so easily broken? Moreover, this kind of barrier could not only be created on one side. As long as there was enough blood force, it could even create several sides at the same time to create a sealed space. Its defense was even more unbreakable. Because of this kind of barrier was known as the ultimate defense of the space ability. This ability can not only be used as a defensive means, but also as a means of trapping the enemy. Gray thought of more. The space barrier's defense was so strong, and it could even create a sealed space. If it was turned into a cage, it could even be used to trap the enemy. Not only could it trap the enemy, but if the space barrier kept shrinking inwards, it could immediately exert a powerful compression force on the enemy. How could this not be a means of attack? Temporarily giving up on the research of the space barrier, Gray once again tried the other derivative abilities of the space rulebook recorded in the space rulebook. However, even after trying all the abilities, he still could not find a fourth derivative ability. Is there no more, or are there other derivative abilities that are not recorded in the space rulebook? Gray frowned slightly. According to the records in the space rulebook, the number of derivative abilities that the possessor of the space rulebook had varied. The lesser ones had 3 derivative abilities, while the greater ones had 4 or 5 derivative abilities. He was not sure what his current situation was. Did he only have 3 derivative abilities, or did he have other derivative abilities? As the space rulebook did not record them, he could not detect them. Looks like I can only slowly explore it in the future. Gray closed his eyes and sensed the bloodline of the space rule book in his body. He could not sense any information related to the derivative abilities of the space rulebook, so he could only give up on exploring. He was more open-minded about this. If there were other derivative abilities of the space rulebook, it would naturally be best. If there were no other derivative abilities, then he would not be too disappointed. After all, the 3 derivative abilities that he obtained were extremely practical abilities that were extremely suitable for him. Moreover, after he obtained the space rule book, the greatest benefit that he obtained was not the space rule book. He was very clear about this point from the beginning. What should I call it? Time rule book, space rule book. The ability that is formed by the fusion of these 2 types of space rule book should probably be called the space-time ability. Gray's eyes were filled with anticipation. Through the induction of the bloodline, he could clearly feel that the time rule book and space rule book had fused together like a hybrid ability, forming a brand new ability. This was the greatest benefit that he obtained after obtaining the space rulebook. Obviously, this ability that was formed by the fusion of the time rulebook and space rulebook was definitely an ability that was far stronger than the time rulebook and space rulebook, and this ability was his greatest gain after obtaining the space rulebook. Chapter 690. Where should I start? Gray could clearly feel that the time and space bloodlines in his body had fused, but he had no idea what kind of ability the fusion would be and what kind of manifestation it would have. Even the Book of Spatial Rules didn't have any introduction to the space-time ability, and he didn't get any feedback from his bloodline. The only information he could get was that the 2 types of nomological abilities had fused, so he was destined to find out on his own. Space-time ability must have both time and space characteristics. But what kind of ability is considered to have both time and space characteristics at the same time? With one hand under his chin, Gray thought hard. The contents of many books he had read during this period flashed through his mind quickly, and the super comprehension ability of his supermemory ability was working quickly. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his mind. He seemed to have grasped something, but also seemed to have grasped nothing. However, he subconsciously used his space-time ability. It was as if he was pushing a towering mountain. It was very strenuous to push. Gray could clearly feel that it was very difficult to use his space-time ability at his current level. Almost instantly, the little remaining power of blood in his body after opening up the space was completely exhausted. Then he felt an inexplicable ability acting on his body. Under the effect of this inexplicable ability, his surroundings were shaking violently, and the world was spinning. The whole world was shaking violently. When he came back to his senses again, the violent shaking of the world had disappeared, and everything returned to normal. But surprisingly, there were no changes to his body or even his surroundings. The space-time ability didn't cause any changes, as if it had failed. I did use the space-time ability just now, but there didn't seem to be any changes. He frowned slightly. The violent shaking of the world meant that he had used the space-time ability and succeeded. But even though it was successful, it didn't seem to cause any changes. At least, he didn't feel any changes. Seems like I can only try using the space-time ability again tomorrow. Feeling that the power of blood was almost empty, Gray knew that today's test would have to end here for the time being. He was going to inform Fod and Kesha, who were not far away, to return to Chaos City. But the next moment he was stunned. Not far behind him, the place where Fod and Kesha had been standing was empty, and the two of them were nowhere to be seen. They had mysteriously disappeared. He felt the soul connection with the two in his mind. The connection was still there, and the two of them were still alive. However, they seemed to be in a very, very far place, and he was unable to contact the other in his mind. What's going on? Gray had a strange expression on his face. With his current level of magic light, it was impossible for him not to have sensed their departure. Moreover, it was impossible for the two of them to appear in such a distant place in such a short period of time. Most importantly, Fod and Kinsa were his loyal subordinates. They would never leave without his orders. Strange, extremely strange. Obviously, the reason for such a strange situation must have something to do with him using his space-time ability just now. But as for what kind of change had happened, the information he knew at present was too limited to be deduced. Looking at the place where Fod and Kinsa were, his pupils suddenly shrank. He quickly walked over and reached out to touch a plant. It was a herb. The leaves on the surface were rather hard and serrated. If an ordinary person was grazed by these serrated leaves, there would be a scratch on their body. He had once read in a book that this grass was called serrated grass. It was an ordinary medicinal ingredient. After being dried and turned into powder, it could be used as an auxiliary ingredient for some magic potions. At the sight of this stalk of grass, the fog in Gray's heart was instantly peeled away. He stood up and quickly flew in the direction of Chaos City. He had wanted to use teleportation, but unfortunately, he awkwardly discovered that he had no more power of blood left, so he couldn't use teleportation at all. However, as a third-tier existence of magic light, even if he couldn't use teleportation, his running speed was still extremely fast. He covered the distance of a few hundred kilometers in a little over 10 minutes. He stood in front of the majestic gates of Chaos City. He saw the huge city gate, the exquisite buildings in the city, and the towering trial tower in the center of the city. At the city gate, city guards in black and white battle armor were guarding the city with cold expressions. Exquisite carriages shuttled through the city. Many of them were pulled by blood beasts instead of horses. To be precise, they should be called beast carriages. After walking into the city, Gray spent some magic coins to find a person who was said to be very well informed in the city. This was a slightly shifty-looking man. After receiving a large sum of magic coins from Gray, he knew that he had met a rich patron. He looked at Gray and fawned over him. "Young master, please ask any questions you have. There is nothing in Chaos City that I don't know. When will the trial tower open?" Looking at the man, Gray asked a very strange question. He was actually asking when the trial tower would open. One had to know that the trial tower had already opened, and he had already entered it and obtained great benefits from it. If you ask someone else, sir, they might not be able to answer. But who am I? I'm most well-informed person in the city, so of course I know. However, in the face of Gray's strange question, the shifty-looking man didn't find it strange at all. Instead, he chuckled and said with a hint of pride, 32 days. In 32 days, the trial tower will open. Sir, you must be here to watch the show, right? Gray didn't answer. Instead, he tossed a handful of magic coins to the man and turned to leave. The latter caught it excitedly with a face full of excitement. He had indeed met a rich patron this time. As expected, walking on the crowded street, Gray thought to himself. He had returned to the past. The space-time ability had brought him back to the past. When he saw the sawtooth grass, he already had such a guess. After swallowing the mist monkey's blood, he had super memory. He couldn't forget anything he had seen. That sawgrass was obviously shorter than when he had first seen it. It was as if time had flowed backward. Therefore, he guessed that he had returned to the past. Going back to the past is not only a change in time, but also a change in space. It is indeed a derivative ability that is very compatible with the space-time ability. After deducing the result, Gray suddenly felt as if the clouds and mist had been lifted. He had a clearer understanding of the space-time ability. The space-time ability had the ability to reverse and accelerate time. However, its range was limited. It was limited to a certain area. The space-time ability, on the other hand, increased the range of the space-time ability. The space-time ability, which could only be used in a certain area, could be used in the entire world. Therefore, time reversed, and he returned to the past before the trial tower opened. There's still 32 days before the trial tower opens. When I used the space-time ability, it was exactly 2 days after the trial ended. In other words, I have returned to a month ago. It's not necessarily a month ago. When I used the space-time ability, the power of blood was obviously low. If the power of blood was abundant, I might be able to go back even further. In this space-time, does the original me still exist? All kinds of thoughts flashed through Gray's mind. He urgently needed to find a place to sort out his thoughts. He didn't go back to his original hotel. Instead, he found a new hotel to stay in. Gray sorted out the thoughts in his mind. Now, he had returned to a month ago, to the time before he had arrived at Chaos City. This raised a question. Did the original him still exist? Had he been replaced by the current him? If the original him still existed, he should be in Leo City right now. He hadn't taken the rune ship to Chaos City yet. He would have taken the rune ship to Chaos City in a few days and would have arrived at Chaos City in over 20 days. He couldn't help but have some thoughts. If something had happened to his original body, would the same thing happen to his current body? For example, if he left a wound on his original body, would a wound appear on his current body as well? And if the original him had been replaced by the current him, would he be able to enter the trial tower again? In that case, it would be equivalent to entering the trial tower twice and obtaining 2 advancements. Let's not talk about whether I can use the trial tower to obtain 2 advancements for now. Will the current me always exist in the space-time, or will I return to the original space-time at some point in time? Gray thought of another question. When the Holy Temple of Light descended on his plane, their strength would be severely suppressed due to the repulsive nature of the plane. As a result, they wouldn't be able to use their great strength at all. In that case, would something similar happen to him as well? After all, he wasn't from this space-time. He should be the object of repulsion in this space-time. Would he be repulsed by this space-time at some point in time and return to the original space-time? I still have too little understanding of space-time abilities. What I can do now is only a guess. However, whether the original me still exists or whether the current me will be repulsed by space-time and return to the original space-time can all be verified. With too little information, Gray couldn't come up with too many conclusions. He could only give up. He planned to verify them one by one through time. Whether the original him still existed or not, he would be able to verify it when the rune ship arrived over 20 days later. As for whether he would be repulsed by space-time and return to the original space-time, he would be able to verify it at any time. Chapter 691. He stayed at the hotel for a night. The next day, his blood power had recovered. Gray was about to leave Chaos City to test his time and space powers again when suddenly, the world was spinning around him. The spinning came and went quickly. When Gray came back to his senses, he was shocked to find that there was another person in the hotel room besides him. It was a young woman. Her body was slender and beautiful. She had beautiful curves. Her beautiful face did not have any makeup on, but she was more beautiful than any other woman who wore makeup. Maybe it was because she was alone, but she was wearing a spaghetti strap dress. The material was silk, and some parts of her body were visible. It made people's imaginations run wild. Her snow-white breasts were even more visible. She was a very beautiful woman, and she was someone he knew. It was Blanca Mandy. Gray did not lack money, so he did not want to make himself suffer. So, the hotel he found was not a low-class one, and the room was a VIP suite. He did not expect that this VIP suite would be the one Blanca Mandy was going to stay in 20 days. At this time, Gray was sitting on a chair at the tea table. Blanca Mandy was sitting on another chair at the tea table. She was in a private space, so she was more relaxed. Her reaction was not as fast as Gray's, so she did not notice Gray. So, cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He used teleportation. Gray suddenly disappeared from the hotel room. When Gray disappeared, Blanca Mandy looked to the other side of the tea table with confusion. She felt something strange, but when she looked to the side, she did not see anything. It looks like I was wrong. Blanca Mandy frowned and shook her head. Even an Annihilation class elite could not leave the closed room without alerting her. That strange feeling was probably just her imagination. When Gray appeared again, he was in the wilderness where he had tested his power the day before. He looked back. Fod and Kenshaw were where they had disappeared the day before. The other sawgrass had returned to how it looked when he first saw it. Clearly, he was back. He had returned to a month later. What did you see? Blanca Mandy's graceful figure was still echoing in his mind. Gray shook his head vigorously, threw it out of his mind, and asked the two, Lord Gray, you disappeared for an instant and then reappeared. Although she didn't understand the intention of Gray's question, Kinsa still answered. It did disappear for an instant. It was very short. If we hadn't been paying attention, we wouldn't have noticed it. Fod added, a split second. Hearing their answers, Gray had a clearer understanding of the ability to travel back in time derived from the space-time ability. As he had guessed, the ability to return to the past derived from the space-time ability would be rejected by the past space-time. Judging from the time before and after, he could probably stay in the past space-time for a day before being rejected back to the original space-time. The time he returned to was exactly the time he left. As for that instant, it was naturally the time he had teleported over from the hotel. The ability to return to the past, the manipulability of this ability, Gray narrowed his eyes. This ability to return to the past for a day and be rejected back to the original world seemed useless, but in fact, it was very practical. For example, if he heard that there was some kind of treasure in a ruin somewhere, he could return to the past and take the treasure away before the ruin was discovered. For example, if he had a death feud with someone, but he was no match for the other party now, he could return to the past and kill the other party who was weaker. Of course, there was something he couldn't be sure of. If he killed someone in the past, would the other party be dead or still be alive in the present world? If the other party was already dead, then returning to the past to kill the other party was completely feasible. If the other party was still alive in the present world, then this method wouldn't work. That's all for today. Let's go back. Gray grabbed Fod and Kinsa's shoulders and used his teleportation ability. The three of them appeared not far from Chaos City in an instant and entered the city through the city gates. It was actually very simple to determine whether what he did in the past would affect the present. He just had to find the people he came into contact with yesterday and ask them if they still had any impression of him. After spending some time, Gray found the shifty-eyed man he came into contact with yesterday. Do you still remember me? Yes, of course. Didn't you ask me when the trial tower would open last time, Lord? The shifty-eyed man was all smiles when he saw Gray. He had a very deep impression of such a generous patron. Among those who entered the trial tower this time, who had the best result? Gray asked with a slight nod. It's Lord Julio. He reached the 27th floor. He is the person who reached the highest floor in the past 100 years other than the Holy Son of Chaos. The shifty-eyed man immediately answered. Gray already had the answer in his heart. He tossed a handful of magic coins to the shifty-eyed man and left with Fod and Kensa. The shifty-eyed man's words proved that what he did in the past through his ability to go back in time would also affect the real world. If he used his ability to go back in time to kill someone in the past, the other party in the real world would also be killed. Going back in time to kill someone is indeed a way to kill a powerful opponent. However, whether this method can be used effectively depends on whether the time can be controlled and the farthest I can go back in time. In the next few days, Gray used his ability to go back in time many times to test it. He had a general understanding of this ability. Within 100 years, he could accurately control the time he went back in time. When it was beyond this range, he could not control it accurately. For example, he tried to go back in time more than 100 years ago, but he went back in time more than 100,000 years before Chaos City even existed. It had to be said that the establishment of the Chaos Holy Temple was of great significance to the Chaos Dominion. 100,000 years ago, the Chaos Dominion was too miserable for ordinary people. Blood fiends wreaked havoc, and piles of bones could be seen everywhere. The lives of ordinary people were numb and miserable. It was a dark time. They lived numbly day by day. There was no pursuit, no hope. They did not know when disaster would befall them. The Chaos Holy Temple killed the rampaging blood fiends and drove them into the depths of the Forbidden Forest, leaving the Chaos Dominion with an environment free of blood fiends. The Chaos Holy Temple had made a great contribution in this regard. Even the top families of the present day were, in fact, deliberately nurtured by the Chaos Holy Temple in order to protect this land. The ability to go back in time is simply a taboo ability. After using the ability so many times, Gray had a direct understanding of it. This was a taboo ability. It was an ability that he did not dare to use easily. When the past was changed, the real world would also be changed. Perhaps a small change in the past would cause a butterfly effect and bring about a huge change in the real world. This kind of thing was not impossible. Although the probability of it happening was small, it was not impossible. In fact, the origin of many big events in history was just an extremely inconspicuous matter. He decided to seal this ability. Unless it was necessary, he would not use this ability. This ability was simply too dangerous. If he was not careful, it would cause a huge change. It was not impossible for him to play with himself, as expected of an ability formed by the fusion of two laws. It can actually give birth to such a taboo ability. Moreover, I feel that the ability to go back in time is not the only ability derived from the space-time ability. After using the ability for the past few days, Gray faintly discovered that the ability to go back in time was not the only ability derived from the space-time ability. However, as for the space-time ability, everything was still being explored. There were no records of it in any books. Although they were aware of the existence of other derivative abilities, they didn't know what kind or how many derivative abilities they were, let alone use them. However, his intuition told him that this was definitely one or more taboo abilities. When he figured out how to use this ability one day, he would definitely obtain another taboo ability. Chapter 692. A few days later, rune ships set off from Chaos City one after another, flying towards the Chaos territory. The various families, and even the top families that had gathered there, took the rune ships and left one after another. "Brother, you must come to Lenini City when you're free. I still owe you a meal." Avery Lenini came to bid farewell to Gray, but the words he said made the corner of Gray's mouth twitch. In order to have a meal with Avery Lenini, he actually had to go to Lenini City. He would only go there if he was crazy. This was a disciple of a top family, but he was definitely not a simple person. Because of the reputation he had made during the competition for the Trial Tower, during this period of time, the disciples of the top families would often come to visit him. Although he knew that the Leopold family had become enemies with the Wagia family, it was clear that not all families were afraid of the Wagia family, especially those families that were already at odds with the Vika family. They didn't care about this at all. After all, they were already at odds with the Vika family, so they didn't care about the Vika family's attitude at all. From these visitors, Gray had a clear understanding of Avery Lenini and the family behind him. The Lenini family. In terms of combat power, they were at most in the middle of the top families, but in terms of wealth, they were definitely one of the wealthiest families. Most of the people in this family had mediocre cultivation talent, but all of them were extremely talented in business. Avery Lenini was even more so. He was known as a business genius that was comparable to Blanca Manti among the top families. He started to get involved in the family business when he was in his teens. Now, he had earned more wealth for the Lenini family than some of the top families had accumulated over decades. He was undoubtedly a business genius. People who could reach the peak of any field were definitely not simple. To be able to achieve so much in business at such a young age, he was naturally not a simple person. The next morning after Avery Lanini left, Gray, Fod, and Kinshaw appeared at the huge square where the rune ships were parked. Today, it was the turn of the rune ships returning to Leo City. It was time for them to leave Chaos City. While waiting for the rune ships to depart, Gray met the people from the Manti family. Naturally, he also saw Blanca Manti. She was wearing a black dress, and her legs were extremely long and slender. A pair of black high heels made her slender legs even more prominent. The upper half of her dress had a lace border around her hands and collar. Her snow-white skin was slightly exposed. It was as white as jade, as white as ivory. Blanca Manti was very enthusiastic about Gray, who was worthy of being roped in. She smiled at Gray and called out to him, "You guys are early. You guys are pretty early, too." Seeing her, Gray couldn't help but think of the cool outfit he saw in the hotel's VIP suite a few days ago. An inexplicable heat rose in his heart. He looked away and nodded in response. Blanca Mandy shrugged and smiled, not noticing Gray's abnormality. "Can't help it. If we were late, the rune ships would leave, and we would have to wait for another month." This was just a joke. The tickets had been bought a few days ago. With the reputation of the Manti family among the top families, the family that operated the rune ships would definitely delay the departure of the rune ships and wait for the arrival of the Manti family. Hence, this could only be a joke. With such a beautiful lady not on the ship, I'm sure everyone would be very willing to wait a little longer. Gray took over the other party's joke and teased with a smile. Could it be that Mr. Gray is very good at making girls happy? Blanca Manti rolled her eyes. She had a unique charm that was different from her usual self. Seeing her like this, many of the young people who were looking over were mesmerized. At the same time, they couldn't help but be jealous of Gray. They couldn't wait to replace Gray right now. "I'm only telling the truth." Gray shook his head and signaled Blanca to look around. Blanca glanced around and found many mesmerized figures. However, she was a business genius after all. She had seen many scenes, so her expression didn't change much. She only gave Gray a slightly reproachful glare, which instantly attracted a wave of jealousy for Gray. Suddenly, Gray's brows furrowed as he looked in a certain direction. His gaze met with a young man's. This was a very handsome young man with brown hair. However, the other party's gaze was filled with hatred. This person was Miguel Villa. Seeing Gray's gaze, Miguel Villa sneered and looked away. However, the sneer on his face didn't disappear for a long time. Because of Gray, he had lost the precious quota to enter the trial tower. Now, Gray was flirting with the woman he longed for but couldn't get. This made him very angry. Be careful of the Villa family. Blanca Mandy also noticed it. She was slightly worried as she reminded Gray in a low voice. "Thank you for the reminder." Gray nodded with a calm gaze. His power had reached the third tier of magic light. Not only did he have the power of the law of time, he also had the power of the law of space. He was even more fearless of the Villa family. It was fine if the Villa family didn't do anything to him. However, if they did, he would make them regret it. The rune ship rose into the sky and left Chaos City, flying towards Leo City. Unlike when he had arrived, Gray had become somewhat famous on the runic ship when he left. Every time he had a meal or went out for a stroll, there would be some familiar or unknown family members who would greet him. As one of the top 5 disciples who had obtained the right to enter the trial tower, many families had already noticed him. In addition, he seemed to have a close relationship with Blanca Mandy, who was famous in the anarchic lands, so he was even more eye-catching. Thanks to these families, the return trip wasn't too boring. Of course, the most important thing was that unlike when he first came, he had become closer to Blanca Manti. Beautiful women were always pleasing to the eyes. Blanca Mandy, who was famous in the anarchic lands and could be said to be perfect in every aspect, was even more so. Being able to spend time with such a beautiful woman naturally made the long and boring time less boring. After this, I don't need to take the rune ship to go to Chaos City anymore. In the VIP room of the rune ship, Gray looked at the scenery outside through the crystal window of the rune ship. After a long while, he looked away. Although he had mastered teleportation, it was impossible to teleport directly from Chaos City to Leo City because the distance between the two places was simply too far. Even with the ruined ship's speed, which was comparable to the 5th tier of magic light, it would still take more than 10 days. For such a long distance, it was absolutely impossible to teleport just once. He had to teleport many times along the way, and he was building a teleportation transit point just now. The specialty of teleportation was that he could teleport to places he had seen before. Every once in a while, he would look at the scenery outside and build a teleportation transit point in his mind. Along the way, when he wanted to go to Chaos City in the future, he could use these transit points to get there quickly. The transit point has been built. It's time to do the daily routine. The ruined ship was far away from the place Gray was looking at just now. Meanwhile, in the VIP room, Gray grabbed Fod with one hand and teleported away from the ruined ship. When he reappeared, he was already in the area he saw from the ruined ship. "Guard for me." After instructing Fod, Gray waved his hand and used a wind blade to create a large open space. Then he stood in the middle of the open space. Crack! Crack! A long crack appeared in the void. This was a crack that was over 40 meters long. It was pitch black inside, as if it could devour everything. However, in Gray's perception, there was a very huge space inside. It was over 40 meters long, 30 meters wide, and 20 meters tall. This was a huge space with a volume of close to 30,000 cubic meters. This was the space that Gray had opened up with his spatial ability in the beginning. With the power of blood that Gray had been injecting, this space had become bigger and bigger. Its volume was close to 30,000 cubic meters now. Crack! With the activation of his spatial ability, Gray's power of blood was quickly depleted. The crack was expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the space inside was also expanding rapidly. The length of the crack had expanded to 50 meters, and the volume of the space had expanded to over 30,000 cubic meters. Gray stopped the supply of power of blood, and the crack in the void disappeared immediately. Although there was still half of the power of blood left, he didn't intend to use it all to open up the space. Now that he had left Chaos City, and the Vega family was eyeing him covetously, he had to preserve enough power of blood to deal with any unexpected situations. This should be enough to hold the Bramble Calamity Crocodile. Following a loud boom, the Bramble Calamity Crocodile was summoned out of the purple ring by Gray. He then quickly stuffed it into the space that he had opened up with his spatial ability. Just as he had expected, the space was now enough to hold the Bramble Calamity Crocodile. It wasn't like the purple ring, where the crocodile had to bend its body to fit. I still need to expand the space. It needs to be at least 100,000 cubic meters. After reaching the magic light tier, he could control 4 disaster-level blood beasts. Thus, the volume of the space had to be increased by 4 times to be able to contain all of the disaster-level blood beasts. After I go back, I'll start hunting disaster-level blood beasts to make up for the 4 I need. It's a pity that even in Chaos City, there aren't any disaster-level blood beasts with the ability to control corpses or ghosts. Regardless of whether it was a disaster-level blood fiend with the ability to control corpses or ghosts, they were all extremely rare blood fiends. Any family that hunted such a blood fiend would usually digest the blood fiend's internal organs, and it was very difficult for them to sell it. As such, even the largest blood shops in Chaos City weren't able to purchase the blood of disaster-level blood beasts with the ability to control corpses or ghosts. Chapter 693. A few days later, the ruined ship docked at the plaza of Leo City. After saying goodbye to Blanca Mandy, Gray took Fod and Kenshaw off the ruined ship. After being gone for a month, the 3 of them returned to Leo City. The Leopold family had already sent a fancy carriage to wait in the plaza. Seeing the 3 of them come down from the ruined ship, they quickly welcomed them into the carriage. The carriage took them to the Leopold family's residence. On the deck of the ruined ship, Blanca Mandy was wearing a blue dress. She had a beautiful body. Not far from her, there was an old man with brown hair and a thin body. He was an Annihilation class elite of the Manti family. Blanca Mandy looked at the old man as the carriage went away. Elder, the Wagia family might attack the Leopold family. Is the family really not going to help the Leopold family? If the Wagia family cannot deal with them, then it means the Leopold family is not worth the Manti family's friendship. The old man's gaze was wise and his voice was calm. However, his words were extremely cold-blooded. It was as if the survival of a top clan was nothing more than the blooming and fading of fireworks in his eyes. But Gray Leopold has a lot of potential. Even my uncle thinks highly of him. If the Leopold family cannot deal with the Wagia family, it would be a shame for them to die like this. Blanca Mandy frowned. She felt it was a pity. Although the Leopold family is at the bottom, they're still a top family. Maybe they have some tricks up their sleeves. They might be able to deal with the Wagia family. The old man shook his head. Plus, if the Leopold family cannot deal with the Wagia family, then it is his fate. A genius who has not grown up is nothing. Feeling the old man's determination, Blanca Mandy sighed in her heart. Although she had a lot of power in the family, when it came to the conflicts of interest between top families, there were still some people who did not have much power. That was why she befriended Gray. If she wanted to have power in the family, she had to have power. That power was not the family's power. It was her own power. Lord Gray, in the month you were away, the shops under the Leopold family's name made a total profit. The carriage carried Gray and the other two back to the Leopold family. The Leopold family's patriarch, Maxwell, hurried over to report to Gray about the Leopold family situation over the past month. Well done. After listening to the report, Gray nodded in satisfaction. He had thought that some of the Leopold family members would take the opportunity to cause trouble in his absence for more than a month, but it seemed that they had not. The bloody purge when he took over the Leopold family was effective. Those who were still alive had long been scared of being killed. They didn't dare to have second thoughts. Send someone to Raleigh City and bring Aubrey here. Yes, I'll do it right away. Maxwell bowed and respectfully left the room. When he came outside, he realized that his forehead was already covered in sweat, and his back was already soaked in sweat. He had seen how terrifying Gray Fergus was. Especially after returning after leaving for more than a month, he felt that Gray Fergus was even more terrifying. In front of Gray Fergus, he actually felt as insignificant as an ant. He didn't know if it was an illusion or if Gray Fergus's strength had increased again in the past month. Not long after, Aubrey, who had been summoned by Gray, rushed to the Leopold family. Lord Gray. Aubrey bowed respectfully to Gray. Not bad. You've reached the second level of magic light. By relying on their soul connection, Gray was able to easily determine that Aubrey's boundary had risen to the second level of demon light. He was very satisfied with this. He naturally didn't care about Aubrey's increase in battle prowess. What he was interested in was the increase in his lifespan. Increasing one's realm by one level would increase one's lifespan by 1 or 200 years. Aubrey could also work for him as a rank 4 potion master for another 1 or 200 years. With his talent, although he definitely couldn't compare to Master Roman, he might have the possibility of becoming a rank 5 potion master. It's all thanks to the Blood Moon potion that Lord Gray bestowed upon me. Aubrey replied respectfully. Gray nodded slightly and said, Stay in the Leopold family after coming here. The Leopold family has already prepared a potion refining room for you. From today onwards, take some time out every day to teach me potion refining. Lord Gray has already obtained the super memory ability. As someone had been resurrected by Gray with his resurrection ability, Aubrey had absolute loyalty. Gray didn't hide his ability, and Aubrey knew that Gray had the ability to transform. I have indeed obtained it. With this ability, it would be a pity not to make use of it. Therefore, I will take some time out to learn potion refining. I understand. I will do my best to teach Lord Gray. Aubrey said respectfully. In a room with several long metal tables, on top of which were many crystal vessels and runic tools, Aubrey spoke to Gray with a slightly serious expression. Lord Gray, I will now demonstrate the refining of the primary healing potion. Over 10 days had already passed, and by relying on the super memory ability, Gray had already grasped the properties of the basic herbs and the usage of the potion refining utensils. Seeing Gray's progress, Aubrey decided to start teaching Gray how to refine mana potions. Originally, he should have started with ordinary potions, But after seeing Gray's learning speed, he decided to skip the ordinary potions and start with the primary healing potion. Aubrey took out 12 kinds of herbs from the preservation medicine cabinet. Because these herbs were in the cabinet, they were still fresh and tender, no different from when they had just been picked. He first started with the initial processing of the 12 herbs. Some herbs only needed leaves and didn't need the rhizome, so he had to pick the leaves and discard the rhizome. Some herbs could only be used in the flower, and the rest would be picked and discarded. After processing the 12 herbs, he washed them 3 times. After ensuring that they were completely clean, Aubrey started the next steps. He took out a runic furnace powered by magic crystals, turned it on, and adjusted the flame to a suitable temperature. Then he placed a crystal pot on top of it and added the hemostasis grass leaves that had already been weighed. Hemostasis grass. Gray had seen it in a book a few days ago. It was a kind of mana herb with oval leaves and was one of the most common mana herbs. It had the effect of stopping bleeding and speeding up the recovery of wounds. Many families cultivated it artificially, and it was also the main ingredient of healing potions. Although it wasn't refined into healing potions, it still had the effect of stopping bleeding and speeding up the recovery of wounds. But only by refining healing potions could this medicinal effect be fully displayed. Chi. The hemostasis grass leaves were very plump and juicy. In the crystal pot, they melted at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning into a green juice. When all the hemostasis grass leaves had melted, Aubrey began to add the second medicinal herb that had already been weighed. This was a kind of medicinal herb with furry flowers. Gray remembered that this medicinal herb was called dandelion flower. It wasn't a mana herb, but an ordinary medicinal herb. However, it was absolutely indispensable because this medicinal herb had the characteristic of catalyzing and could completely stimulate the medicinal effect of other medicinal herbs. With the addition of the dandelion flower, the green liquid formed by the hemostasis grass leaves seemed to have been stimulated. It emitted a rich fragrance, and one couldn't help but feel refreshed when they smelled it. And at this time, Aubrey began to add the third medicinal herb. After more than 10 minutes, Aubrey, who had obtained the green liquid through filtration, poured the green liquid into 5 crystal bottles and sealed them. He finished refining the beginner healing potion and looked at Gray. "Young Master Gray, do you need me to demonstrate it again?" Gray shook his head. With the super memory ability, he could see every detail of the other party clearly. He had already completely memorized it in his mind, and there was no need to demonstrate it again. After reviewing it in his mind, Gray stepped forward and started refining potion for the first time in his life. After taking out the medicinal herbs and cleaning them, he took out the runic furnace and started it. He controlled the temperature to an appropriate degree, put in the crystal pot, and added the hemostasis grass leaves. After they had melted, he added the dandelion flower. After the medicinal effect of the liquid was stimulated, he added it again. After more than 10 minutes, Gray obtained the filtered green liquid in a crystal beaker. Aubrey stepped forward and carefully observed it. He even tasted it before excitedly saying, "Congratulations, congratulations. Congratulations, Lord Gray. It's your first time refining a magic potion, and you actually succeeded in refining it on your first try. With Lord Gray's talent in alchemy, you might be able to become a 6th-tier alchemist comparable to Master Roman in the future. I'll only refine potions as a hobby. I won't invest too much time in it." Gray slightly shook his head. He didn't intend to focus on refining potions. He might have succeeded in refining the beginner healing potion on his first try, and refining potions seemed very simple. But in reality, the field of refining potions wasn't simple at all. Even with the super memory ability, if he didn't put in a lot of effort, he wouldn't be able to achieve much. Relying on the complete memory ability of the super memory ability, he could refine a low-level mana potion after seeing it once. However, it was impossible to refine a high-level mana potion with the complete memory ability. High-level mana potions usually used extremely old magic herbs. Although they were the same magic herbs, there might be huge differences in their medicinal effects due to the difference in age and growth environment. In the case of differences in medicinal effects, it was obviously impossible to rely on the complete memory ability to repeat the steps of others. If one wanted to succeed in refining potions, they would have to make appropriate adjustments according to the strength of the medicinal effects. This required experience, and it needed to be repeated many times to form a medicinal effect. There was no shortcut. Moreover, the most important thing for an alchemist wasn't refining potions, but invention. Only those who invented their own mana potions could be called alchemists, and this required a lot of time to experiment. Chapter 694. Blood Fiends. There are blood fiends. Quick hide. Hide in the cellar. 5 giant birds with wingspans of more than 20 meters suddenly appeared in the endless wilderness. Some villagers working in the fields were so frightened by the terrifying aura of the 5 giant birds that their legs went weak. They fell to the ground, and the smell of urine wafted out from their bodies. Some wild beasts in the forest were frightened by the aura and fled in all directions. They rushed into the nearby villages, and several people were bitten to death. Some cities were so frightened that they were thrown into chaos. The residents of the cities all hid in their basements, and the experts in the cities stood on the city walls. Their foreheads were covered in cold sweat, and their faces were solemn as they prepared for battle. Their hearts were cold. Judging from their size, there were definitely 5 magic light level blood fiends. If 5 magic light level blood fiends descended on their city, it would be a disaster for a small city like theirs, which didn't even have a magic light level expert. The only king-class expert in the city was an extremely old man. He was also standing on the city walls. When the 5 magic light level blood fiends flew over the city, he couldn't help but sweat in his palms. Fortunately, the 5 magic light level blood fiends didn't descend on their city. They merely flew over the city, and after spreading their aura, they quickly swept past. That is, as a king-class expert, his eyesight was naturally excellent. After the 5 giant birds flew over the city, he actually saw several people standing on the backs of each of the 5 giant birds. These weren't wild magic light level blood fiends. They were blood fiends cultivated by certain large families. It was because of this that the other party didn't attack the city. Otherwise, with the bloodthirsty nature of blood fiends, their city might not be spared. Using magic light level blood fiends as transportation. Who were these people? He was horrified. Magic light level blood fiends were an unimaginable disaster for him and this city. They were disasters that could destroy the entire city. However, such a disaster was actually being used as a means of transportation. One could only imagine how terrifying these people were. At his level, it was hard for him to imagine what kind of people they were. However, there was no doubt that any one of them had the power to destroy this city. The 5 giant birds flew all the way and scrupulously venting the pressure on their bodies, causing panic along the way. The people on the 5 giant birds all looked at the people below them as if they were looking at ants, who were frightened by the aura of the giant birds and fled in panic. The wind whistled past their ears, causing their cloaks to flutter. They were high and mighty like gods, trampling everything under their feet. As night fell, the 5 giant birds landed in a city with a population of several 100,000. More than 20 people jumped off the birds and entered the residence of a ruling family under the trembling guidance of the city's ruling family. Second uncle, how long will it take to reach Leo City? After a sumptuous dinner, Miguel Villa looked at a brown-haired middle-aged man and asked, "At this rate, it should take another week." The brown-haired middle-aged man pondered for a moment and said with a doting tone, "Don't worry, there's still a week at most, and you'll get your revenge. Where a rabbit bit you, what would you do? Kill it and eat its meat." That was what the Villa family was preparing to do. After being provoked by the Leopold family, which was at the bottom of the top families, the Villa family's decision was to slaughter this family and take all the accumulated wealth of this family for themselves. A week. Miguel Villa's eyes were filled with anticipation. Just you wait, Grey Leopold. In a week, you'll know the consequences of offending my Villa family. Losing the right to enter the Tower of Trials was his eternal pain. It was also the reason why he hated Grey the most. Why didn't he challenge others? But he chose to challenge him, causing him to lose the right to enter the Tower of Trials. When the time comes, I'll push that woman under my body and viciously CK her in front of your eyes. I'll let you die in despair and regret. Thinking about the woman beside Gray Leopold who looked like Blanca Mandy and had a perfect body, he couldn't help but feel his heart burning. A few days later, in the Leopold family's alchemy room, in the crystal pot, the medicinal liquid was slightly bubbling. One by one, Gray put the herbs into the crystal pot. The timing was extremely precise, as if he was an alchemist who had been practicing alchemy for tens of years. In the end, a total of 33 herbs were added into the crystal pot. After that, the level 2 Earth Escape Potion was successfully concocted. The reason why he was able to grasp the timing so accurately was naturally because he had memorized all the details of Aubrey's alchemy in his mind. He was able to replicate all the steps. Congratulations, young Master Gray. You're already able to concoct level 2 magic potions. Aubrey congratulated. In just half a month, he had become a level 2 alchemist. He could clearly feel how terrifying Gray's alchemy talent was. There's no need to flatter me. This should be the limit of what I can achieve in a short period of time. Any higher and I won't be able to reach it in a short period of time. Gray shook his head. His mind was very clear, and he wasn't blinded by success. In fact, starting from level 2 magic potions, there were already differences in the medicinal properties of the magic herbs. To concoct this Earth Escape Potion, even if he had seen Aubrey concoct it, he still failed twice before succeeding. He knew that this should be the limit of what he could achieve in a short period of time by relying on his supermemory ability. Any higher, and he wouldn't be able to reach it in a short period of time. He would need to accumulate experience. Relying on his supermemory ability, he could only take fewer detours. He was already unable to achieve rapid progress like he was doing now. Any field wasn't simple. Even if one had superb talent, without a long period of hard work, it would be impossible to achieve great success. It was the same in the field of alchemy, and it was the same in the field of practice. Even if one had the ability to transform, without perseverance and hard work, it would be very difficult to reach the peak. This was also the reason why he had defined alchemy as a hobby from the beginning. His main focus had always been in the field of practice. As for alchemy, it was just a hobby. It was even just an auxiliary method for practice. After a long period of alchemy, his mind became slightly tired. Gray left the alchemy room and went to the garden. In the garden, hundreds of flowers were in full bloom. There were red, white, purple, trumpet-shaped, lotus-shaped. There were all kinds of colors and shapes, but without exception, they were all extremely beautiful. The beautiful scenery in front of him was too beautiful to take in. There was also a rich floral fragrance that assailed his nostrils. Gray's mind was immediately aroused. He walked into the pavilion and lay down on a deck chair. "Kinsha, bring me a glass of fruit juice with ice." He ordered Kinsha in his mind. Not long after, Kinsha brought over a glass of fruit juice with ice and a plate of pastries. Anyone who had been resurrected by his resurrection ability could be directly communicated with in his mind. It was extremely convenient, as if he was wearing a walkie-talkie. The only pity was that the distance was limited. If the distance was infinite, it would be extremely useful. He only needed to send the resurrected people to various parts of the origin world, and he would be able to know what was happening in the origin world at the fastest speed. Although the origin world also had a rune item like the magic rune machine that could transmit text messages over a long distance, it seemed to be extremely difficult to make. Moreover, the cost was also extremely high. Only the forces of the Holy Cathedral knew how to make it. The Leopold family had such a magic rune machine. It was given to them by the Chaos Holy Cathedral after the Leopold family became a top family. It could receive and transmit messages from the Chaos Holy Cathedral. Young Master Gray, the hunting team just sent news. They have found the second disaster-level giant beast. Kinshaw walked forward and said while massaging Gray. "Okay." Gray let out a nasal sound from his nose in response to Kinshaw's words. After returning to the Leopold family, he ordered the hunting team of the Leopold family to pay attention to the traces of the disaster-level blood beasts. He was preparing to go to the Forbidden Forest to hunt the disaster-level blood beasts in a few days to replenish the number of corpse puppets. In addition, he also asked the hunting team of the Leopold family to look for disaster-level blood beasts with corpse puppets and ghost abilities. However, they were unable to find any. Clang, clang, clang. Suddenly, the rapid sound of a bell rang. It was extremely loud, ear-piercing, and sharp. It traveled very far, very far. Everyone in the city could hear it. Kensha was shocked. Gray jumped up from the rattan chair and looked at the sky with a frown. The sky was blue. White clouds floated by from time to time. However, at this moment, a huge hemispherical barrier had appeared in the sky. It was like a huge pot lid covering the entire Leo City. Obviously, the defensive barrier of Leo City had been activated. What's going on? Gray asked Fod in his mind. He immediately received a reply from Fod. Lord Gray, the Vega family is attacking. They're finally here? Hearing Fod's reply, Gray's lips curled into a cold smile. When he was in Chaos City, he had already seen the Vega family's intention to attack the Leopold family. Now, they were finally here. Go hide in the basement. After instructing Kensha, Gray quickly rushed to the city wall. Soon, he was on top of the city wall. At this time, there were already many elites of the Leopold family standing on the city wall. Fod was among them. Outside the city wall, 5 giant birds with wingspans of more than 20 meters hovered in the sky. There were people with powerful auras standing on top of them. A strong pressure spread out and swept toward the city. They looked down at the city from above. They looked down at Gray and the others on the city wall. Their eyes were filled with arrogance and disdain. Among them, 3 of them exuded an extremely terrifying aura. It was like an extremely huge mountain pressing down. Many people were suffocated by this powerful aura. They broke out in cold sweat. With such a terrifying aura, there was no doubt that they were annihilation-level powerhouses. Chapter 695. 3 Annihilation Class Elites. The leader of the Leopold family, Maxwell, had cold sweat on his forehead. Judging by the pressure, there were at least 3 Annihilation Class Elites among them. Aside from the 3 Annihilation Class Elites, the other people had a scary presence. None of their presence was weaker than magic lights. How did the Leopold family provoke such a scary enemy? Some of the Leopold family's higher-ups were terrified. Their faces were full of shock. A faction with Annihilation Class Elites was definitely a top family, and there were 3 Annihilation Class Elites. Even among the top families, they were probably in the middle. Could it be? Some of the Leopold family's higher-ups looked at Gray and Fod. The 2 of them had just returned from Chaos City, and such a powerful enemy had come to attack them. They could not help but wonder if the 2 of them had attracted the enemy. The 5 giant birds descended to the height of the city wall. The people on them could be seen clearly. Seeing the people on the 5 giant birds, some of the Leopold family's higher-ups screamed in shock. The Wagia family. They are the Wagia family's people. As the Leopold family's higher-ups, they sometimes came into contact with the higher-ups of other top families. Although they did not know all of them, a few of them were from the Wagia family. What? You don't even have the courage to come out and meet me? Weren't you very arrogant in Chaos City? On the giant bird closest to the city wall, there was a tall, skinny old man. It was the Annihilation Class Elite from the Wagia family, Felipe. He looked at Fod, who was behind the defense barrier. He had a mocking look on his face. Were you very arrogant in Chaos City? Mr. Fod, what is going on here? How did you provoke the Wagia family? Some of the Leopold family's higher-ups looked at Fod and questioned him. Their voices were obviously unhappy. Fod had led the Leopold family to submit to Gray, which made them very unhappy. Now, they had provoked the Wagia family. It made them vent all the anger they had accumulated. Today, I want to see what kind of power the Leopold family has. How dare you provoke the Wagia family? Felipe looked with interest at the Leopold family that already had some infighting. He released his pressure and continued to speak. Provoke the Wagia family? Mr. Fod, is this true? Did you provoke the Vika family in Chaos City? Lord Fod, you lack consideration when doing things. You will destroy the Leopold family. The upper echelons of the Leopold family spoke one after another. their voices filled with blame for Fod. Felipe, what does your Vika family want to do by invading my Leopold family's territory? Fod frowned in the face of the many voices of censure. He turned around and coldly swept his gaze across the crowd. The majesty that he had accumulated in the past immediately intimidated these people. He then looked at the tall and skinny elder Felipe and reprimanded him. What do you want to do? Isn't that obvious? Felipe sneered. No one can provoke the Wagia family without paying the price. Today, I'm here to make your Leopold family pay the price. Make my Leopold family pay the price? Your Wagia clan thinks too highly of themselves. A trace of disdain appeared on Fod's face. Arrogant. Even now, you still dare to be so arrogant. I thought Felipe was exaggerating, but it looks like he was right. The disdain in Fod's voice completely infuriated the Wagia family. Among the Wagia family, an old woman with silver-white hair coldly grunted. She was another of the 3 Annihilation class elites that had an Annihilation class presence. Fod, I will give you a chance. Give up all of the Leopold family's wealth and commit suicide in front of us. Then, my Wagia family will let the rest of your Leopold family go. An old man with a slightly hunched back coldly grunted. He was the oldest and strongest of the 3 Annihilation class elites of the Wagia family. Great-grandfather and Grey Leopold. Grey Leopold must commit suicide as well. Hearing that Grey wasn't one of the people who committed suicide, Miguel Vija hurriedly said. At this moment, he was already glaring at Grey with hatred. You are the Grey Leopold who stole my Wagia family's right to enter the trial tower? My Wagia family's right to enter the trial tower is not that easy to steal. You should commit suicide as well. The hunchbacked old man followed Miguel Wagia's gaze and saw Grey. His eyes were cold as he spoke. He stole the Wagia family's right to enter the trial tower? Is he the one who caused all of this? It must be him. He must have angered the Wagia family. Many of the Leopold family's higher-ups stared at Grey. Their eyes were full of anger. Normally, they were afraid of Grey's power and punishment methods. They could only be angry and not say anything. Now, in front of the Wagia family's threat, they exploded. After all, they did not know if they would be able to survive. Shut up! Grey yelled to stop the whispering. After all, he was using power to force people to submit. He was not using a resurrection power. Normally, he could control it, but at a critical moment, it could easily backfire. However, there was no other way. Using the resurrection power on this kind of person was too much of a waste. It was not worth it to waste the resurrection quota. Relying on his powerful strength and the method from the last purge, Grey temporarily intimidated the higher-ups of the Leopold family. He looked at the hunchbacked old man and said calmly, "There is something I must correct. The trial tower's right did not belong to the Wagia family. As for stealing the Wagia family's right to enter the trial tower, that is even more impossible. You can still be so calm in front of me. You are indeed worthy of being the one who stole the trial tower's right." The hunchbacked old man looked at Grey with interest. In his heart, he was determined to kill Grey. With such a powerful cultivation talent and such a temperament, if he did not die, he would definitely become a big threat to the Wagia family in the future. However, geniuses die young easily. I think you are the type to die young easily. No, I don't think I'm the type to die young. You, on the other hand, should be reaching the limit of your lifespan. I am afraid you are not far from death. Grey shook his head. Humph. With a cold snort, the hunchbacked old man stared at Grey with a gaze as cold as a sharp blade. You have a sharp tongue. Do you really think that I can't do anything to you with the protection of the defensive barrier? A terrifying pressure came from the hunchbacked old man and pressed down on Grey like an ocean. However, it did not have the effect he had expected. Facing this ocean-like pressure, Grey did not move at all as he stood on the city wall, not affected in the slightest. As early as when Grey had fought with Fod, he no longer feared the annihilation level pressure. Moreover, now that his boundary had risen and he had reached the 3rd level of demon light, his ability to resist pressure had become even stronger. Seeing that Grey was not affected in the slightest under the pressure, The hunchbacked old man was furious. With a wave of his hand, a crimson flame descended from the sky like a rainbow and slammed into the city's defensive barrier in front of Gray. Rumble! A loud boom rang out. Although the defensive barrier of the city did not shatter, it shook violently. A series of ripples surged out, causing the entire city to tremble slightly. Some of the city residents who had climbed to the roofs to watch were shocked. They quickly climbed down the roofs and hid in the basements. Let's attack together and break this defensive barrier. The hunchbacked old man ordered the old woman and the tall, skinny old man. The old woman and the tall, skinny old man nodded and attacked together. The old woman generated many giant ice blades in the air to attack the city's defensive barrier. The tall, skinny old man used a crimson flame to create a giant spear that was 30 feet long to strike the city's defensive barrier. Rumble, 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 rumble. The city's defensive barrier kept releasing white and crimson light. It was like white and crimson fireworks. It was not just the 3 Annihilation class elites of the Wagia family. Everyone else also joined in the attack. The violent tremors continued, and the entire city shook violently. Large pieces of tiles fell from the roofs of houses, and some old houses collapsed on the spot. However, it was the core city of a top-class family. It was the most important place for a top-class family. When it was being built, they did not hesitate to ask a top-class rune master to help set up the rune circle. Even though it was being attacked by 3 Annihilation class elites and many Magic Light class elites, the defensive barrier did not show any signs of breaking. Stop! Seeing that it was pointless to keep attacking, the hunchbacked old man waved his hand to stop everyone. He looked at Gray and the others on the wall. This city's rune circle must be the work of a top-class rune master. The Leopold family is willing to spend a lot of money, but now the city is locked down. How long can a city with a population of a few million last? Hearing what he said, the Leopold family's higher-ups, who saw that the defensive barrier had successfully blocked the attacks of the Wagia family, felt their hearts sink. The man was telling the truth. With the population of Leopold City, the stored resources could only last for 1 or 2 months. 3 Annihilation class elites and 20 Magic Light class elites are still unable to break through. The defense is not bad. He was satisfied with the defense of the Leopold family's base. No, it should be called his base now. Gray coldly laughed. He said something that the people of the Leopold family did not understand. I do not know how long it can last, but I'm sure it will last longer than you. He looked at Fod, and the latter understood. He had the highest control over the city's runic matrices and immediately created a hole in the city's defensive barrier that was big enough for 1 person to pass through. Gray jumped down from the hole, and Fod followed suit. The 2 quickly appeared outside the city. You dare to come out? When they saw the 2 players outside the city, the Wagia clan's members, who were originally prepared to guard outside the city and cut off Leo's city's supply of resources, couldn't help but be stunned. They then looked at the 2 players as if they were looking at an idiot. If they stayed in the city, they could rely on the city's resources to last for 1 or 2 months. If they gathered all the resources and did not care about the lives of ordinary people, they could last for a few years. They did not expect the 2 of them to walk out of the city. With their power, facing 3 Annihilation class elites and 20 Magic Light class elites was no different from suicide.